This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news. Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more. The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, to get you through an Apple Thursday. Apple earnings this afternoon. Do you think Chairman Powell will be hanging on the press conference?
Yeah, he should. He's probably looking to upgrade his phone and his watch and his wearables and all that kind of stuff. But it's important for Apple because they've got a China issue, both from an end user market. They sell a lot of stuff into China. Plus, it's a big part of their supply chain, and they got to get investors more comfortable with the China risk.
I looked at their financials this morning just to try to pretend I was Paul Sweeney, and boy, do they mint money.
Oh,
even
boy.
without
Free
growth
cash
or
flow.
revenue, they just mint money. It'll be interesting
Yep.
to see there if we get a dividend increase like we did not get a dividend from Amazon. That's part of our theme today. Lots of other themes as well. But yes, a look back, teens weens, to the Fed meeting yesterday. Ludovic Subrin will be with us here in a moment with Allianz to go over some of that hopium. I saw lots of hopium yesterday.
Yeah.
I know you missed it, but
at the very least, I think Fed Chairman Powell tried to take the rate hike off the table.
That went away.
And I guess that's what we're seeing in the markets here with the S&P up about 0.7% in futures.
We saw some improvement there. I mean, the bellwether for me is a 10-year real. Sorry, for those of you on YouTube, you can tell I'm getting set up here. I got the Tang Zero.
Yep.
We got that going. Thank you, Eric, for the Tang Zero. But the Sank is looking a little. Is it hot over here?
Nothing but the best up on the sixth floor.
Sanka Tang Zero. It's like we're like back to the 60s. Anyways, thank you for being with us on Apple CarPlay. On YouTube, go to Bloomberg Podcast, search there, and also requested the entire show, including what we do with John Tucker. The entire show will be out 3 p.m. this afternoon across YouTube Bloomberg Podcast. So we got a replay going now, which is a good thing. We're in the Interactive Broker Studios here with futures up 36 with a Bloomberg Business Flash. John Tucker.
Oh, and breaking news, the maker of expensive clothes hangers, Peleton, announcing that Barry McCarthy stepping down as the CEO, and they also are reducing the headcount once again. Some other earnings this morning. Moderna reporting a narrower first quarter loss than Wall Street had expected. Apollo Global Management also checking in, reporting higher first quarter profit. The firm raking in more management fees and originated a record $40 billion of private credit. That, of course, a key area for growth. Stock futures, looking up this morning, traders taking a little comfort from the Fed's signal that there's no plan to raise interest rates. Now remember, we were talking about rate cuts as early as March. That's no longer the case, of course. The Fed struck a more dovish note than some had expected. And then, of course, investors looking ahead to earnings from Apple. We're going to get that at the close of regular trading in the pre-market right now. Shares of Apple, they were up about 1%. Overall, the Dow futures, 170 points higher. That's up 0.5%. The S&P E-mini futures, 33 points higher. That's up 0.7%. The NASDAQ futures, they're up 0.9%.
We're coming back
right now.
Yeah.
You want me to do treasuries?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Insist.
2-year yield, which I'm going to say.
We call that the Sweeney yield.
Yes. I'll
the more
take that all
policy
day.
reactive. 2 basis points lower. 4.93%. Let me throw in the yen because that's a little weaker right now. It's up to 155.07. We check the markets all day long. Right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm not Lisa Mateo.
John Tucker, I got to ask here. I mean, I know you have the Peleton Bike Plus, and do you find the rotating touchscreen really helps?
It does, because I can hang ties on that, right? The suits go on the right handlebar, and then the pants go on the left.
This is where we need Lisa, because I think she has 3 in the house.
We have 2.
You have 2 in the house?
We have the bike and the treadmill.
Do you use them, or are they
My girlfriend hangers? On it every day. Every day. Yeah, she's like 1,800 rides or something crazy. She's one of those crazy people.
Up 10%?
Huh.
Yeah, up 10% pre-market trading.
Thank you, Rich Drew. Barry McCarthy stepping down as CEO at Peleton. We'll touch on that through the morning. That's a Sweeney stock that he follows carefully. This is an important conversation because you saw the market explode like 12 seconds after Chairman Powell started talking yesterday. Then it gave away again. and now we're up again. Futures up 35 right now. My head is spinning. Let's get some clarity now. We do that with Ludovic Saran, Chief Economist at Allianz here, and try to pick up the pieces off the Fed meeting. My operative word, Ludovic, was hope. There was a lot of hope yesterday from the chairman. Is that how you saw it?
Look, I think it was a pretty interesting meeting, right? Because remember, people were expecting even a hike yesterday. So now he's just confirming, I guess, that the economy in the U.S. is surprising him every week more and more. And I think the hope is now that there's going to be a cut sometime, but the lack of hope is that it may not be as soon as expected, right? So,
what is
for the bond markets, for the bond, vigilantes, this is bad news, yeah?
Yeah, I look at it, and I guess it goes, and John Farrell mentioned this yesterday, the speakers, starting with Austin Goolsbee, are ever more important. I don't buy it for a minute. Ludovic, do you believe that the individual Fed speakers shape the direct policy of the FOMC?
That's the $1 billion question. No, I don't think so. They give the range. I call that, it's like, tail shooting, just like they give a bit the range so that markets can get a bit of forward guidance when they don't have forward guidance anymore. That's the data dependency, right? The biggest mistake in monetary policy of the past decade is this data dependency. It gives no ability for markets to get any idea before the meeting. So I think the speakers now are trying to do that range guesstimate before the chairman speaks and give the final word.
Ludovic, are you surprised at all, or were you surprised yesterday that Fed Chairman Jay Powell really seemed to go to some lengths to take the rate hike opportunity off the table?
I don't know if I'm surprised by the QT. For me, the announcement to stop, to slow down QT was maybe the biggest surprise. What I'm interested in yesterday is the comments from Powell that there is no sign of any abatement because we know it lies with two things: immigration and fiscal. And so, to a certain extent, it was, I don't know if it was a reckoning of an absence of power on what is left of inflation. I think for me that was maybe this powerless, for Chairman Powell, comments, this powerless moment for him saying, "Look, I cannot do much. Numbers are good, but it's not in my hands." Yeah.
So, Ludovic, I mean, this all kind of ties into the broader economic outlook here. We're going to get an important data point tomorrow with the labor market. What's your view of the U.S. labor market? That's clearly going to be something that Fed Chairman Jay Powell is going to focus on.
Look, I think estimates are, around 230,000 jobs for the April read. So that's slightly lower than what we had in March. But look, unemployment rate is record low, 3.8%. I think hourly earnings are also expected to increase by another 0.3% or even 0.4%. So the first thing, there is no great resignation. It's the great stay. I think that's what LinkedIn economist Berger says. I think that's pretty clear. And the second thing is this powering through immigration of the labor markets in the U.S. So this is going to be another strong read. It's good news for the U.S. economy for an election year that is so polarizing. I'm very surprised and impressed by the lack of muddle through, if you will.
Is the focus on inflation too much? I just sat there yesterday trying to keep track of any time anybody mentioned jobs in America, the American labor economy. And trust me, folks, Paul and I know a lot of people are really suffering out there. Things have tightened up in many parts of America. But Ludovic, just as a final question here, should there be more Fed chat on labor versus inflation?
I don't think so. I think the Fed chat should focus on inflation because labor is much less, solid a way to look at it. What is good labor market for the U.S. right now? Is it? You remember when Yellen tried to address the distributional effect of labor in several of her speeches, and when she transitioned to Treasury, she took that with her. I think it's a much more fickle set of indicators that would lose even more markets.
Ludovic, thank you so much. Ludovic Subran with Allianz off of the Fed meeting yesterday. Huge response here to the Peleton CEO. Somebody said, have I ever been on a Peloton? I said, I've been on the saddle at the $1 Million Cowboy Bar.
I saw that.
In Jackson Hole. Had a beverage, $7 martini. It was great.
Worth it.
And I'm on the saddle in Jackson Hole. I've done that, but I haven't been on a Peloton. Let's go to a Peloton expert with our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and John. Police began removing barricades at a pro-Palestinian demonstrators' encampment at UCLA. Last night, the Los Angeles Police Department declared a citywide tactical alert. Officers in riot gear responded to a massive crowd. The previous night, a brawl erupted on campus after counter-protesters tried to break down a pro-Palestinian encampment. One of the faculty members who came to campus to condemn the brutal attack against peaceful protesters says he has never seen anything like it.
They were throwing projectiles at them. They were trying to ram the barricade with all kinds of objects. They were screaming racist, sexist, homophobic things. We just heard it just now, people yelling at us, go back to where you came from.
Classes were canceled yesterday because of the protests. Less than a month after Arizona Supreme Court cleared the way for a highly restrictive 1864 abortion law to go into effect, state lawmakers have voted to repeal it. The governor says she'll sign it. A section of a highway collapsed after heavy rains in a mountainous area in southern China, sending cars tumbling down a slope. At least 36 people are dead, 30 others injured. Testimony is scheduled to resume today in former President Trump's criminal hush money trial in New York. But first, Judge Juan Merchan has again scheduled a hearing to consider whether to hold Trump in criminal contempt for violating his gag order, this time on 4 additional occasions. The judge already ruled Trump violated the gag order 9 times and fined him $9,000 Tuesday. Trump focused part of yesterday's campaign rally in Freeland, Michigan, on the judgments against him in several cases, including the gag order.
Unconstitutionally gagged. He gagged me. So I'm not even supposed to be, I would say, talking to you because he gagged me.
Prosecutors are seeking $1,000 fines for each of 4 comments by Trump that they say violated the judge's gag order. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
And Damian Cesar, email in if you can or get me on live chat. Guys, tell me they're not going to go to a VAR in basketball. So they're saying the Philadelphia guy last game traveled. And the Knicks game before that was all messed up. But that's part of the sport, right? In the mayhem of it, the refs miss it, right?
Yeah.
Can we all agree that's okay?
You want them to be right, but I'll take the human factor involved in that.
Like, I want to keep the umpire back there. I don't want the electronic ball
The VAR
strikes.
thing, like in soccer, it's ridiculous.
No,
it's ridiculous.
It's part of sport.
I agree.
Go NBA.
Yes,
I love what they're doing. Why is the game at 9 o'clock? Does the network decide that, Paul?
I think the network has a big say in it. It's the New York market, but it's too late. And apparently there is not a West Coast game. The West is already wrapped up.
They're doing 2 games right on TNT, right?
Yeah, but I think if there were a West Coast game, that would be in the 9 o'clock slot. There's not, so they had to pick one of the East Coast.
So basically 100% of kids miss the game.
Exactly.
I mean, 100%.
Yep.
It's all there. It's just ridiculous.
Yep.
I just totally. Is this who fixes this?
It's the network. It's the network and the NBA. So it's where I think they're going to get the most money from the New York market.
10 seconds. Paramount update.
Nothing. We're waiting for a deal. Tomorrow's a big day because the exclusive negotiating with Skydance, that window closes tomorrow.
Ellison.
So if there's going to be something with Ellison, presumably it's going to be tomorrow, unless they get an extension.
Okay. God, look how much we got in there in 45 seconds.
Boom.
NBA VAR.
Yep.
9 p.m. basketball, Paramount. I mean, we do it all. Futures up 39, they lift. Small stocks up 1.2%. From New York City on Apple CarPlay on YouTube, search Bloomberg Podcast. There's a live chat now. Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Start with shares of Peleton, most active in the pre-market. They're all over the place. Right now, up about 7.1% after announcing the CEO, Barry McCarthy. He's stepping down. The company planning to cut about 15% of its global workforce. The next to the Mag 7 cohort reports after the close of regular trading today. iPhone sales going to be the focus for Apple investors. Those shares this morning in the pre-market up just over 1%. And futures getting a lift right now. We're going to get some more insight into the health of the economy with initial jobless claims this morning. Also going to get factory orders. Of course, the main focus, tomorrow's jobs report. The Fed did seem to downplay the idea of a rate hike this year. Dow futures up 182 points. S&P futures up 36. The NASDAQ futures right now up 165 points. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom.
John, somebody out on Twitter, on YouTube, on live chat on YouTube, they're asking, and we know you're beta testing the congestion fee.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're in for Lisa, do you have to pay the congestion fee when you come in and take
just to
over
see
for
how
Lisa?
it's going to work?
Yeah,
yes.
Just to make sure they can
testing.
clearly read
see
my
this
license
credit card.
plate.
Yes.
Yeah, just hold up the Visa.
So what did you get a bill at the end of the month?
That's so just
they take your
why
money.
Are you trying to get me started?
I just get it.
I had a nice, pleasant start to the morning.
John Tucker, thank you so much. Somewhat in for Lisa Mateo today. We are now joined from the chemical engineer from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Troy Gajewski. Troy, you know from your Newtonian calculus, which you use every day at FS Investments, that it's plug and chug. What's the most important variable in our math right now for a stock market if you're plugging and chugging? What matters the most?
I think right now it's 10-year yields, right? I mean, when you think of the mini correction we've gone through recently, equity markets certainly cheered stronger economic growth with simmering inflation coming into the year because recession risk was dropping like a stone. But once we got above a 4.5% 10-year yield, that was about all that investors could take from a standpoint of where real yields and nominal yields were. And so I'd say keep your eye on the back end of the curve because that's going to drive a lot of the price action.
I heard that a couple times yesterday, Paul, and I can't say enough how Ken Rogoff is on the same page as Troy Gajewski. This real yield 10-year nominal dynamic is critical. Yeah,
I'm looking at the 10-year, just sitting here right about 4.6% here. So, Troy, when you were listening to Fed Chairman Jay Powell yesterday, he seemed to be trying to take that rate hike off the table, but that's about it. What you heard yesterday, did that change your outlook at all here?
No, I think, once again, the Fed's done a reasonably good job, a few slip-ups over the last couple quarters with the pivot talk of explaining the reaction function. Look, inflation stays high. We're not cutting anytime soon, but keeping hikes off the table. We think, if you look at the labor market, it's obviously cooling. Whether you look at JOLTS, whether you look at where excess savings levels are for future consumption. So there's no reason to overreact to this resurgence of inflation data. And they have the ability to be patient, just keep rates higher. And at the same time, they're still draining their balance sheet, albeit at a slower pace now, starting in June.
All right, so let's pivot a little bit from the Fed. We think we know where we're going there. How about earnings? What have you seen from earnings so far this quarter? Importance for your outlook?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest key for earnings so far from a standpoint, this is particularly acute at McDonald's and Starbucks, is, we have seen signs of the lower income consumer cracking. Cracking may be a strong term, but weakening. And whether you look at delinquencies in credit cards or subprime auto loans, they've been, trending higher. We know that excess savings, particularly for the lower deciles, has been exhausted at this point. And now you're starting to see that trend show up in earnings. So that doesn't mean the world's ending. It just means that if there is some type of shock to markets or to the economy, the consumer is not in the same shape that they were in 2022, and they could single-handedly carry the economy through a period where every other factor was contracting.
All right, so if we think that the lower end of the consumer is maybe a little bit challenged here, how does that change, or how does that impact kind of your investment philosophy? What are you telling your clients here for really how to allocate capital in a market that has had a nice bounce off those October lows?
Yeah, I think so. The key for clients right now, the majority that we interact with, is everyone's sitting on huge piles of cash. Wealth management firm average cash balances are roughly 20%. So,
wow.
It's a historic number. It's one of the biggest issues with last year's performance because there was an opportunity cost to that cash. Cash is a Northwest quadrant strategy, the fishing frontier, very, very little risk, but after taxes and inflation, you're really making nothing, right? If you're in the highest tax bracket. So how do you put that capital to work without taking uncomfortable levels of risk where you can meaningfully increase total return? And so there's a whole host of alternative strategies. If you need liquidity, you have liquid multi-strategy exposures that are wrapped in mutual funds. If you can sacrifice some degree of liquidity, but you want income, you can focus on perpetual BDCs or senior secured commercial real estate lending strategies. If you can tolerate even more liquidity, you now have democratized private equity strategies, particularly focused on the middle market. So tying it back to your point on the lower-end consumer, if you're in an investment strategy that's dependent upon the consumer re-accelerating from here, that's not a good strategy, right? If you're in an investment strategy where if there is some type of short-term pullback because yields breach 5, or we get softer economic data or earnings, that's a little more challenged now because the biggest issue with equities is not forward earnings, particularly for mega cap tech. It's where multiples re-expanded back to close to 21 times forward earnings. We're right around 20 now, and I'm very sympathetic to the argument that we can stay here, but it's really hard to see more multiple expansion.
With great respect, Trey, I'm not trying to be snarky. I think it's a really important question for a huge body of people. Is Apple a growth stock or a value stock?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not going to hedge it, Tom, but I'm going to say think about it as GARP, right? We had a client meeting the other day that was explaining one of our theses as more value. And I'm like, it's really not, right? It's right. GARPy. And I think Apple is really the same way. It clearly will not have the growth prospects that it used to. Right. But I think its multiples reflected that. But it's still, obviously the global champion for smartphones. And it's just a question of what other new technologies they can bring.
Troy Gaske, thank you so much. FS Investments on the math this morning. Out on YouTube, Paul, nobody told me this. They said, yeah, we're going to do YouTube.
Yep.
And there's a live chat thing. And I was like, just, are you kidding me? Back to back. Good morning from Munich.
Really?
Good morning from Marrakesh. Good morning from Mexico City.
Wow.
Chad Hurley, the founder of YouTube, told us. He said, we'll only talk to people worldwide where their city begins with M.
All right. Very good. We'll take that.
I guess what we're doing. But Paul and I and the whole team, even Tucker, John, chime in here. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Could you ask the guy in Marrakesh if he's got a room? Because I want to go there.
It's gorgeous. That's where I was there with Gorgiev for the IMF. And it's really, really something. There's a hotel that's sort of out of like a Humphrey Bogart movie, La Muña or whatever it is. I mean, it's great. I mean, the martinis are $50. It's just, it's outstanding. But, the international reach of YouTube.
It's not is
jaw-dropping.
Right. I mean, we started in this business. We were the New York market, as big as the New York market is, but now it's a global market. Thank you to the streaming businesses and the all the satellites, Sirius XMs and all that kind of stuff. Who knows? We're everywhere.
History with Bloomberg Radio. John, you still have on your kitchen mantle the one-channel Bloomberg Radio.
Yeah,
great marketing device, by the way.
It was. I guess the founder's idea was like when we started off to boost listenership, send everybody a radio. It's pretty cool. It's a collector's item. Yeah. So I've been trying to sell mine
on eBay.
On eBay. No, that's not. I have 3 or 4. You only get one channel, and it's just like,
We've gone from a one-channel radio to Good Morning Marrakesh, Mexico City, and Munich. Just extraordinary, the reach on YouTube. We're humbled by it every day. That's out at YouTube. Search Bloomberg Podcast. And yes, as of a week ago, there's a replay every day. See it 3 p.m. Wall Street time. This afternoon, Tim Carroll, Apple earnings. Good morning, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with his Bloomberg Business Flash. Futures put into a higher open, and you can credit the Fed with this. Traders taking some comfort from remarks by Jerome Powell, interpreted as no interest rate hikes for this year. The Dow futures right now up 167 points, rise of 0.4%. S&P E-mini futures 35 points higher. That's up 0.7%. NASDAQ futures right now up 160 points. That's up 0.9%. In the pre-market, Peleton Interactive, most actively traded right now, up close to 7.5%. They are cutting jobs, and the CEO is out. Also, earnings from Cigna beating expectations for the first quarter earnings, raising the outlook for the year. The pharmacy benefits business, that is a big part of the story. As we look at treasuries right now, 2-year yield, that is down 3 basis points. We're at 4.92. The 10-year, 3 basis points lower. That's at 4.59. We check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
This is great. New York Turnpike, I-90. The thruway, New York State thruway through the Mohawk Valley out to Buffalo and all that. A little bit west of there, good morning, just west of Missoula, Montana.
Wow.
You go up, there's Alberton. And, good morning in Alberton. I'm still not over the Flying R Cafe in Alberton went out of business.
Really?
COVID or whatever.
Yep, okay.
It was tough. We would stop there for the chicken fried pork tenderloin.
Sure, who doesn't?
It made La Barrel La Crack look like nothing.
Oh, wow.
It was like way superior to Cracker Barrel.
That's
Good morning out in Alberton, Montana, I should say. Alberton, Montana, just below the Flathead Reservation.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, we got to reach.
We'll go out there in the summer, maybe.
Norm's got a Peleton out there.
Exactly.
Bonds matter. They came in 6 basis points yesterday. Bonds, everybody's recalibrating. Why don't you bring in the gentleman from Morgan Stanley? He's recalibrating this morning.
Dan Skelly, Managing Director. He's head of Equity Model Portfolio Solutions at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. Our good friends over there at Morgan Stanley. Hey, Dan, what did you hear from your Federal Reserve Chairman yesterday? Did it change anything you're telling your clients at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management?
Hey, Tom. Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me on, and good morning. So what we heard from Chair Powell was a true reluctance to say the word hike. I think the final word count on the transcript was reporters as Powell won in terms of mentions of hike. So, look, we heard Powell talk about the fact that inflation has made a lot of progress over the last year in the wider context. But he admitted that the last several months have obviously seen a stalling in progress based mostly on shelter and wages. And it didn't really change our ultimate view that we will ultimately see 3 cuts this year. That's Ellen Zettner's expectation.
You're staying at
this is important. Talk about that.
Dan, this is important. This morning after that Fed meeting, Ellen Zettner stays with 3 cuts this year.
That's right. Now, we admit the path is a bit narrower given what we've seen, but there's 3 data points that we're tracking very closely and that we know the Fed is tracking very closely, entailing new tenant rents that in the first quarter actually decelerated than many had seen. The news went largely on financial service advice and some things that are working closely to the stock market down naturally. And then lastly, goods pricing is continuing to disinflate, along with China exporting disinflation on the back of a lot of excess capacity. So that's some of the things we're looking that will keep us confident, but we admit the path has become narrower.
Dan Skelly with us at Morgan Stanley. We're going to redo his audio here right now. Paul, I'm going to go right back. I mean, I know it's a cute phrase, hopium. I saw tons of hopium yesterday, and I get it that people are looking at forward disinflationary vectors. Ethan Harris, retired now, follow on LinkedIn, Ethan Harris, hugely valuable.
Yep.
But I'm sorry, the hope there that over the next, 3 CPI reports, there'll be an immaculate disinflation. That's all this is about.
I think so, Tom. And, you look at the historical data, January, February, March, I think it really surprised on the upside on the inflation prints pretty much across the board, which that's what kind of brought back I think the sense that, hey, we don't need 6 rate cuts, maybe 1 or 2 is kind of what the market's discounting. And then we even had the rate hike discussion kind of seep into the conversation. And again, I think that's what the Fed Chairman Powell was trying to take out of the market.
Right.
They're not really at this point looking at a rate hike.
And I said in the middle, you got FOMC go on the terminal. They got one for the ECB as well. I don't know if Japan has one. But you go FOMC go, I'm sorry. The November 7 meeting is 2 days after the election.
Yeah, what do you do then?
So, 10 p.m., let's assume we have an election for starters.
Yes, good point.
10 p.m., the next morning we wake up with Biden 2 or Trump, I guess Trump 2.
Yep.
It's like Grover Cleveland Alexander, who's a president in the 19th century. and the answer is then the next day, Powell's got to stand up
Good luck.
and tell us politics doesn't matter.
Right.
Are you kidding me?
Exactly. So, I mean, you're looking at this calendar here, Tom. I mean, that's going to be an extraordinary time. We've got June 12th, just to give you a FOMC go, June 12th would be the next meeting. And that's where a lot of people think if there's going to be something to be done, perhaps it's at that June 12th meeting.
Well,
and then we
Goldman
go.
Sachs reaffirmed that this morning.
I know. And, you're hearing, Dan Skelly saying, Ms. Zeitner at Morgan Stanley continuing to look for 3. So, Dan, we've got you back here, Dan Skelly, Morgan Stanley Wealth Management here. Think about what's the message to your wealth management clients today about kind of where they should be allocating money, given that, looks like we're going to have a Fed that's going to be a little bit more accommodative, perhaps. Earnings are coming in okay. What's kind of your allocation call at the moment?
Sure, Paul. Well, importantly, Powell kept the easing bias, right? He was, as we talked about, he's very reluctant to even mention the word hike. And while there is this kind of emerging consensus out there among investors that now the no landing is back on the table, we would actually say the economy is much more nuanced than that. And it's really not your typical flight path, if you will. We're seeing this 2-track economy where early cycle consumer trends are decelerating. Some of the AI and fiscal spending related demand is driving long cycle demand and trends to benefit those sectors and industries. And so what we're saying is, Paul, you want to be more actively oriented. This is actually, quite frankly, creating an environment of idiosyncratic opportunity. So we're paying very close attention to these trends at a very bottom-up level.
We're kind of more than halfway through the earnings cycle here. Are you of the opinion that investors need to really stay with the big tech names, or should they be saying, hey, let's diversify a little bit, try to find some value outside of some of these big tech names that have worked so well for investors?
So it's a combination, and I don't mean to punt on the question, but the reality is you've seen the Magnificent Seven narrow in above itself into what people are saying the Fabulous Four this year. And so there's still some selective opportunities within that cohort. And frankly, you saw, to your point, Paul, you saw decent prints from a lot of those names over the last week or so. At the same time, however, we are seeing increasing opportunity in some of the more quality value parts of the market, whether that be in some of the big banks, energy names, and certainly in the industrials. As I referenced earlier, there's so much unique demand and spending going on within the manufacturing sector that there's a lot of opportunity there.
And Dan, the heart of the matter into your equity call, which is the courage to stay in the market. And I think Chairman Powell indirectly alluded to this yesterday. He basically implied that the 1.6% GDP number was a big fake out because of inventory, foreign dynamics, net exports, et cetera. And that the GDP, as he said, no stag, no inflation. There's just, the stag isn't there right now. Is that the Morgan Stanley view?
It is. And if you saw, Ellen revised up her GDP numbers for this year and next by 70 basis points. So we're looking at, for each year, so we're looking at 2% plus growth over this year and next year. And that was an upgrade to our forecast. And so look, it comes back to this idea, Tom, of the 2-track economy, right? To date, you've seen the upper income, the 1% of companies with these unique AI or fiscal related tailwinds driving the lion's share of growth. Now, what was one of the big components of the 1Q miss in GDP or lower than expectation? It was inventory, right? And so on the other side of the track for the economy, we're hearing from a lot of freight companies this earnings season that a lot of consumer-oriented companies are not restocking inventory, okay? So the reality is the longer the Fed stays on hold, the more you're going to see that track of the economy continue to skid. And so this is something we're monitoring very, very closely.
Dan Scully, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated this morning with Morgan Stanley. Paul, you got the Pearl River in China. You come down it, and it looks a bit like fields.
Okay.
And now it's Shenzhen. They built it out of nowhere. Good morning in Shenzhen, China, listening. It's very cool, like all across the Pacific.
Yep.
My first international, true story, my first international anecdote, and trust me, we were ignorant folks, was a 15-year-old kid in Vietnam.
Okay.
I fell off the chair.
Yep.
That was my first, this is years ago, over 2 decades
Was he being
ago.
punished?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, a 15-year-old kid in Vietnam. We listen to you as Bloomberg on the economy. Well, good morning for listening in China, David. Greatly appreciate that. The Ritz-Carlton breakfast in Shenzhen.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Wow. Okay.
You go, that's
Worth
a
the trip.
cook from Boston. So, they can do the Boston, the breakfast and all that. Futures up 32, Dow futures up 155. We went up with a Fed meeting, we went down, and now we're coming back a little bit. The VIX 15.05.
Wow.
With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, John, former President Donald Trump faces additional sanctions in his hush money trial as he returns to court today for another contempt hearing followed by testimony. Prosecutors are seeking $1,000 fines for each of 4 comments by Trump that they say violated a judge's gag order barring him from attacking witnesses, jurors, and others close to the case. That is on top of a $9,000 fine the judge imposed on Tuesday related to 9 separate gag order violations. During a campaign stop yesterday on a court off day, Trump in Freeland, Michigan, focused on the judgments against him.
The judge, by the way, is the most conflicted person in the history. I don't think there's ever been a more conflicted judge. Crooked and conflicted.
Trump also campaigned in Wisconsin. Hundreds of police are dismantling barricades today at the UCLA campus after pro-Palestinian protesters refused to leave. Demonstrators reconstructed barricades after an attack by counter-protesters yesterday. At least 15 people were injured. Arizona has almost completed the process of repealing the Civil War era near total abortion ban. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
After the Senate passage, it just needs the governor's signature, and Katie Hobbs has supported it all along and posted right after the vote, "We are going to get rid of this awful law once and for all." Democratic State Senator Eva Birch says it is time.
I don't want us honoring laws about women written during a time when women were forbidden from voting because their voices were considered inferior to men.
When the process is done, Arizona will revert to the prior law, which allows abortion up to 15 weeks of pregnancy. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
President Joe Biden included ally Japan along with rivals China and Russia in a list of countries he called xenophobic in a speech at a campaign fundraising event in Washington. Biden reiterated remarks he made last month linking China's economic woes to its unwillingness to accept immigration. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Michael, thank you. Dr. John Carl Malone.
Yep.
Age 83. He's one of my heroes. Full disclosure, I was involved with telecommunications. Remember Tacoma
TCI,
A?
yeah.
TCI,
Yep.
Telecommunications, 3 lifetimes ago. Paul Sweeney, what does John Carl Malone do with Warner Brothers Discovery? The NBA may walk to NBC.
Yep.
It was 9, then it was 8,
Yep.
and the ugliness of getting to $7.60.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, he's got a big problem with Warner Brothers Discovery. He's also got a big problem with Charter Communications. So Dr. Malone has been long traditional media, we'll call it traditional media, for decades. And he wrote it all the way up and to a certain degree has been writing it down. They've obviously divested a lot of stuff, liquidated a lot of stuff, but he is long Warner Brothers Discovery, he's long Charter. I don't know what he does here. I don't know what you do with Warner Brothers Discovery here. We're trying to figure out what happens to Paramount.
Yeah, Paul and I are going back to basics on this. Warner Brothers, 63% debt. That's all you got to say. It's that simple. The return on invested capital, 3%.
Now we'll look at some. markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. The Fed sounded like it won't hike rates this year. That is pushing futures higher right now. Dow futures up 162. S&P E-mini futures up 32. The NASDAQ futures up 147. Apple in the pre-market up 1% ahead of its earnings after the close of regular trading. Teen clothing retailer Rue 21 filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. That's according to the court filing from Delaware. The filing marks the third time the company has filed for Chapter 11 protection. Cigna Group with earnings beating expectations for the first quarter. They raised their outlook for the year. The pharmacy benefits business, big part of that story. Shares of Fastly, kind of a standout this morning for all the wrong reasons, down 34%. The infrastructure software company lowering the full-year projections for revenue and profit. If you type EA on your Bloomberg terminal, you'll see 365 companies in the S&P 500 reporting so far this season. Of those, 79% have reported positive earnings surprises. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
John, thanks so much. Paul, retail's a tough business. I mean, I've always been removed from it. And it's just, the securities analysis of retail. The bottom line is you get down to the lower end of the income statement, and they're picking up dimes
pennies
in front of a bulldozer.
Yep, exactly right. I mean, it's just been a super low margin business. You try to, make it on volume, and then the other thing that I think is crazy when you read some of these retail research analyst reports is you kind of got to get fashion right if you're in the apparel business too. Yeah. So not only do you have to sell enough stuff at the right price, but you got to figure out what people want.
Eric, can we get Oliver Chen at some point in the next couple days with TD Cowen?
Yeah, he's good.
I mean, Dana Telsey is wonderful. Got a bunch of other people, but Oliver lives on Madison Avenue. He knows which store's going out here, which one's coming in here. He could tell you going up Madison Avenue, everything Arnault rents.
Yep.
And owns, and they're buying.
Yeah,
one of the big stories in New York City, folks, is some of these European houses are buying the buildings. Mm-hmm. Outright as well. It'll be interesting. Futures up 32.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily front pages without Lisa Mateo, brought to you by Interactive Brokers Bond Marketplace. Access their vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities with no markups or built-in spreads and low transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds. Thank you, Interactive Brokers. Again, at ibkr.com/bonds. John Tucker, the newspapers.
All right, I got to admit, a disclosure up front. Some of them aren't front pages. I had to go to page 6 for a few of these.
That's our warning.
Just your warning. Yeah. Let's start with this one from Bloomberg. Elon Musk's latest cost-cutting victims, summer interns. Tesla rescinding offers just weeks before the internships were set to start.
You got to be kidding.
So this has prompted aspiring employees to take to LinkedIn. They're appealing to other employers to try to take them in. Here's one. I'll read right from it. At 8:46 a.m., I opened a Tesla email for flight information. By 11:25 a.m., my internship offer was gone. Wrote Miami University student Joshua Schreiber, who said his start date was 3 weeks away and that he had already spent thousands on housing. Like a lot of other would-be Tesla interns, getting uncomfortably close to the end of the school year. They say the surprise calls from Tesla informing students that their offers no longer stand have left them without a lot of time to find replacement gigs for the summer. So one part of me is like, these poor kids. The other part of me is like, yeah, welcome to the real world.
Yep.
Anyway.
But Tesla, it's such a mercurial situation.
Can I use the word erratic?
Yes, okay. You can.
All right. This, you're just talking about retail. This comes, interesting article from Women's Wear Daily.
Yeah, I read it every day.
Great read from Evan Clark. When Jeff Jeanette came to the phone in November for his quarterly report as CEO of Macy's, he had a long list of accomplishments from his nearly 7-year tenure at the top. He also had one acknowledgement telling WWD that really consistent, profitable growth had eluded him. There's a lot of change and challenge all at once. Macy's, you have Nordstrom, Dillard's, Kohl's. They collectively drove nearly $63 billion in sales last year, marking a decline of $3.2 billion. It used to be that customers needed those department stores to do all their one-stop shopping. Now you can click your way to anything. And more than that, the department stores, according to this article, losing their connections with consumers and with the fashion ecosystem that they actually once supported. So the end result, the analysts are saying, you got to scale down.
Yeah, Steve Sadoff at Saks inventing the word exclusive, and now at MasterCard, I believe they're chairman. And Steve Sadoff once said to me, they finally have figured out inventory management, and people don't go to the department stores. They got to go to the actual store of the brand, and they're afraid they're going to run out of whatever they want.
Yeah.
That's the whole emotional thing. Get that blouse now because it's going to be gone, which is radically different than what it was a decade ago or so.
This one comes from the Journal this morning. There have always been people who relish driving their cars until the wheels fall off.
Not me.
That would be me. Anyway, the cost of car ownership keeps skyrocketing, so more and more people are doing this. The average transaction price on a new vehicle, $46,660 in March. Compare that with around $39,000 just a few years earlier. This, according to Edmunds. Repair and maintenance costs up 8.2% year over year. Insurance costs up over 22%. So the increase in the car costs, a lot of developments that have led to inflation. To cope, owners squeezing more life out of their current ride. U.S. vehicles' average age hitting 12 and a half years in 2023.
12 and a half, you said?
Yeah.
How old's your ride, John Tucker?
I don't know. 2019, I think I bought it.
Okay.
That's Bush the first, not Bush the second, right?
That's like, I've already got over 100,000 miles on it, so it's 110.
I mean, help me here, Paul, because you're riding the fancy car. The fact is all this stuff is more expensive because the cars aren't like we knew as kids.
No, it's...
My father took the knob off the radio and only used pliers to turn it so we wouldn't screw around with the radio.
I told you the story. My old man bought the pickup truck for the farm. To save costs, he didn't put a radio in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Who needs a radio? We're working.
We did that. But now, what do you got? How can you land on the moon in your car?
Absolutely. It is all... I just bought a new car the first time in 10 years, and I was shocked at the amount of technology that's in there. And it's like having your iPhone is the car.
And so you said it's up 8% to fix it. Why am I surprised?
Oh, no, it's well, you have to pick the right kind of car. I would say you have to factor in the cost for repairing it before you BMW. I'm sorry, Paul.
Exactly.
Anyway, let's finish with this. This is actually from Bloomberg Opinion. They're doing a riff on it. There's a cutthroat secondary market for reservations in Manhattan's hottest restaurants. So you have to fork over serious cash just to get into the front door to the people who go online and make reservations under a false name and then sell it on the secondary market. But it could get worse. There's the reservation system followed by high-end establishments in Japan. They don't allow first-time customers. They only let in regulars and their guests. So
there's a restaurant in Midtown that will be nameless, which it's very solid American food. And I quit going because it was so pretentious about the pecking order of who got in the door. And I happened to be on the pecking order lower, but the way they treated you, it was really like swarming. I just want a meal,
Just sort of tangential to this, Tim and Carol on their show, they had the head of the Michelin guide in. Absolutely fascinating discussion. Yeah. And also, there's a restaurant at Disney World in Florida that is now got a Michelin rating.
Yeah, David Gurr went to it. Yeah, his kids went to it.
Could you imagine that? And I don't think they let kids in.
No, he got his kids in because he's David Gurr, and he ordered, and the kids didn't finish their food, and he almost left them there.
Yeah,
it cost a fortune.
It does.
John Tucker with the newspapers. Thank you so much this morning. Futures up 30. We did some weird music yesterday, May Day music. Let's get back to conventional music as we can. The boys from Sheffield.
I need
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Bloomberg Surveillance after the Fed meeting before Apple. Tim and Carol.
Yes.
This afternoon.
Of course.
Diving deep into Apple cash flow, Apple CapEx. I guess there's some product. It's China.
It's China. I think it's all about China.
You did that?
Yeah, so we'll see. Nobody breaks down earnings like Tim and Carol. Just right, real time, live, good stuff.
You're going to see that out on YouTube, Apple CarPlay, and of course on YouTube, search Bloomberg Podcast. Lots going on there. Special announcement, finally. People are like, Tom, the West Coast.
Yeah.
They're like, we're not listening at 4 a.m. They want a replay. You're going to get a replay. It's out 2 p.m.-ish, 3 p.m.-ish. We're trying to make it sooner. A replay, the entire show. Look for that on YouTube. Thrilled to have that out to you. Bloomberg Surveillance after the Fed meeting, brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Let Cohn Resnick's enterprise risk advisors help you build confidence in your supply chain using data analytics. Visit cohnresnick.com. And we say good morning to all of you. Really interesting market. Up big time at the beginning of the press conference. Cratered. And we come back. Futures up 32. My head's spinning. VIX 15.06. With a Bloomberg Business Flash. John Tucker.
All right, we'll start with the next of the Magnificent Seven. Apple reporting after the close of regular trading. Right now, the pre-market up about just less than 1% at this point. Of course, as Paul mentioned, focus probably going to be on iPhone sales in China. Stocks, the major stock index futures right now higher. Dow up 173 points. S&P E-mini futures up 33 points. The Nasdaq futures right now up 141 points. A day after Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell downplayed the prospect of further interest rate cuts, we have the more policy-reactive 2-year, 2 basis points lower. That's at 4.93. We missed 5% again. 10-year yield, 2 basis points lower. That's at 4.60 right now. Amazon, Nvidia posting small gains as well in pre-market trading. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. I mean, he's got parchment from Chicago and Chapel Hill and all that.
UConn.
What they don't talk about. Yeah, he played basketball at UConn. He was awesome there. Why don't you bring him in?
I mean, Jonathan Pingle all over the place here. Jonathan Pingle, Chief Economist at UBS Securities. He joins us here, PhD from this school down in North Carolina. I can't remember the name. But, Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us here. What did you hear from our Federal Reserve Chairman yesterday? Anything to change your economic outlook?
Nothing that really fundamentally changed our outlook, but I have to say the way the chair handled the press conference was pretty different from what we thought. I also have to set the record straight. At 5'11", I did not play basketball at UConn. I did think it was actually a pretty unique. Might be a stretch, but I thought it was a press conference where, the chair really threw it back to the data and almost completely got out of the business of trying to guide markets about what was going to unfold with monetary policy.
Let's get some perspective from yesterday. Alarian of Cambridge.
Tom, what I'm worried about, because I truly believe that this is not about lags, that there are structural aspects that are running the equilibrium inflation rate higher than it has been in the past. I worry that the Fed is going to be over tight this year. I worry that the Fed is not going to end up cutting because they're going to be so data dependent, so reactive, that they're not going to look at the weakness that's coming.
Right.
In fact, if you simply read the earnings reports of McDonald's, Starbucks, PepsiCo, Nestle, the list goes on, there is no doubt that low-income consumers are struggling. Their balance sheet effects have gone from positive to negatives. The pandemic savings are run down. Their credit card balances are high. They rely entirely on the labor market, entirely on wage income. And if something goes wrong in that labor market, we are going to see this economy slow much faster than anybody would like it to slow.
Mohammed Al-Arian, University of Cambridge, there. He'll be with us next week, I'm told. And what's so important here, Jonathan Pingle, is I alluded to it yesterday, the societal impact here. Is this a Fed running policy for the financial markets and the fancy people? Or are they actually looking at the split in America of a lot of people struggling with labor, struggling with jobs, struggling with inflation?
So I wouldn't phrase it as they are looking, let's say, at the aggregate. But Tom, I really do have to agree with the question you're asking and Mohammed's general thrust. When we look at what's unfolding in the economy, 2023, the Fed had to fight a lot of fiscal thrust. And while that was happening, you're watching net interest payments for households rise. But if you think about, net interest payments rising for households and the households paying the higher interest rates, that's not the same household as the one who are earning the net interest income. And we actually changed our economic forecast last year. We had been predicting, weakness, seeing this deterioration amongst sort of indicators like delinquency rates and fewer and, cardholders paying minimum balances. But when we broke down how wealthy households were by income bucket, the upper 20% of the income distribution is just awash in cash, liquid assets, and high levels of wealth. And they do a lot of the spending.
Paul wants to get in here, but Paul, I can't tell you how this is almost like British economics. And there's a whole heritage of this in Chicago as well. The idea of aggregating our economics now in America, I mean, Meltzer used to yell at me and say, Tom, you got to aggregate. How do you aggregate in this economy with half the nation flat on their back?
Exactly right. So, Jonathan, are you of the opinion that, there's a lot of folks out there, both in academia and in practice, that are saying this Fed is already behind. They should be cutting rates now. That if you look at the real-time data, inflation is in fact, I'm not going to say whipped, but certainly under control. How do you think about the Fed, and are they behind?
Well, I think in a way they are. One of the reasons you can have that sentiment also, if you look at a Taylor rule, and John Taylor was no dove, and you think that, their long-term dot or policy, their median is, between 0.5% and 1% real, the funds rate should be 100 basis points or more lower by most of those rules. So you can really make that case. But I think one of the things the Fed's doing is it's almost like they've got a short-run neutral rate, and they're updating that with every payroll report. So they've seen sort of the strong economic data, that sort of has bolstered their case that they can wait, and they can keep rates elevated even relative to the progress they've made on inflation.
All right. So as we sit back here, Jonathan, are you comfortable? Well, let's just start, get the UBS house call on GDP. How do you think GDP is going to be for the rest of the year and then for next year?
Yeah, we think GDP is slowing to roughly 1.5% this year, and then the next 2 years is going to run roughly between 1.5 to 2.
Is that staggy? Powell said there's no stag, there's no inflation. Does Pingle say there is stag, there is inflation?
Well, we think inflation is going to generally cool over the next few years. Staggy, I don't know. No, we're not really telling a stagflation story. We're telling a story more where the economy really is going to slow. A lot of the fiscal impetus looks like it's coming out, and I think that is going to help price pressures.
John Pingle, we got to go, but with your basketball heritage at Connecticut, Sixers or Knicks? What do you think here? Sixers or Knicks? It's getting exciting.
I'm kind of I grew up in New York, so I'm kind of a Knicks fan.
Okay, Jonathan Pingle for the Knicks there. Thrilled to have him on with all of his prowess at stores as well. He's with UBS. It's a Swiss bank in America. Futures up 34, Dow futures up 186. Paul, to me, the VIX speaks volumes. 1920 world's coming to an end.
Yep.
And after all the gyrations in theater yesterday, 15.03.
15 on the VIX. It hasn't even sniffed 20 for a while, so interesting.
Toss up here with our news in New York City. It's either John Tucker or Michael Barr. Let's see.
Well, you got the bad one. This is Michael Barr.
Oh, no, that's the good one.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and John. Police began dismantling some of the barricades and tents erected by pro-Palestinian protesters at UCLA after violence erupted the previous night with counter-protesters. In Washington, House Republicans are promising hearings and vowing to restore law and order as campus protests continue. Bloomberg government's Jack Fitzpatrick has more on the political reaction to the pro-Palestinian demonstrations.
There was the vote yesterday on defining anti-Semitism. There has been a conversation about withholding federal funds from universities that don't sufficiently respond in ways that are aligned with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act that bans discrimination, anything anti-Semitic. So there's a really wide range of responses from Congress.
Bloomberg government's Jack Fitzpatrick in the nation's capital. Arizona Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs expects to get the bill repealing the state's 1864 abortion ban as soon as today. Without hesitation, Hobbs said she will sign it.
I am glad that they finally did the right thing and overturned this or voted to repeal this draconian ban. I'm looking forward to getting it to my desk and signing it and getting rid of this ban once and for all.
Yesterday, state lawmakers agreed to repeal it. Today, President Joe Biden travels to Charlotte, North Carolina to meet with the families of the 4 law enforcement officers killed Monday while trying to serve felony warrants. Yesterday, President Biden included allied Japan, along with rivals China and Russia, in a list of countries he called xenophobic in a speech at a campaign fundraising event in Washington. Biden reiterated remarks that he made last month linking China's economic woes to its unwillingness to accept immigration. This time he added Russia, but also long-standing ally Japan, whose prime minister was here for a summit and a state dinner in Washington just 3 weeks ago. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, and John.
Thank you so much. I got to bring it up right now. Obligatory Orioles coverage. We've been doing it. It's like playoff ball. I'm tuning in every night.
Yep.
And Yankees-Orioles is like it's April into May, and it's like the third week of September.
The Orioles look great. Now, yeah, they got smoked yesterday.
Can anyone drink legally? I mean, they're like they're like with the Cincinnati Reds. They're like all 19.
Well, see, yeah, you're right. They're a young group, and they've learned how to work that salary cap. But boy, they've got a lot of talent.
They do, and they look like they're going to be good for couple of 3 years at least. I mean, they were good last year, really good. Okay. They're going to be good for a while. So it's up for the Yanks can play. I think the Yanks can play with anybody. Their lineup is phenomenal. It just comes down to pitching. Where's Garrett Cole, by the way? Where's our ace?
Well, he's hurt. You know, they come back. Chris Sale came back at the Braves, but I'm sorry. With the Padres, I watched Mr. Soto, who I think is since Wade Boggs, nobody commands a plate. Yeah. And he's just the only reason the Yankees, I mean, every game he shows up. He had a walk last night. Yep. Do you count a walk as a single?
Yes.
I do.
Yes, I do. Yes.
I do.
You get on base on first base, that's a single.
That's a single.
Plus he can run.
The way he was 2 for 4 last night.
Right.
And I'm sorry, Soto's kept him going here, but what a joy to see playoff ball in May.
You got to give a shout out also to the A's. Their bullpen is good.
The A's?
Yes.
The A's, they had
Where do they play?
4,600 people in the stands last night. Pittsburgh Pirates. I looked. 4,600. I mean, they're done, right?
Yeah,
they're moving.
Yeah.
In 3 years, they're moving. Yeah.
I mean, got to give a shout out.
We got to go. That's our obligatory Orioles talk. We do that on Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker from the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. The Fed sounded like it won't hike rates this year, so that's pushing futures up right now. Dow futures up 190 points, S&P E-mini futures up 35, the Nasdaq futures up 148. Two-year yield 2 basis points lower, 493. Apple up close to 1% ahead of the earnings before the close. Peleton Interactive, the CEO Barry McCarthy stepping down after 2 years in the role, as the company also plans to shed about 15% of its global workforce. Challenger Gray and Christmas reporting this morning that job cut announcements fell 3.3% year over year for the month of April. And you want to do golf news real quick? Phil Mickelson. He's given perhaps his biggest hint yet to Bloomberg TV that he's considering retiring from a stellar career in golf, shall we call it. We check the markets and other stuff all day long. Right here on Bloomberg Radio.
Yeah, I mean, one of the all-time greats, but I mean, he's been obviously the leader for this live tour and the migration era, so that's been some controversy, but it's been lucrative for him and for a lot of players. But most golfers don't quote-unquote retire. They just kind of play the senior tour.
How old is it? 52,
53? 53, something like that. Okay.
So
still plays great.
The PGA's paying a ton of money to Tiger and the rest. What's the new PGA look like? We don't know.
It's still diluted. We still have the golfing world is still divided between live and PGA. Both are diluted. Changed. It's not nearly as good a product. Got to bring it back together.
I should mention he's speaking to Bloomberg TV interview for an upcoming episode of Latitude with Haslinda Amin.
Very good.
Awesome.
Right now, we do this once in a while where we go from, like a really basic conversation, we're going to get fancy and pro. We can do that with Stephen Englander. He is with the Standard Chartered Bank, and with our question is the #1 cross-rate currency strategist in the world. Steve Englander, really honored to have you on the show today. My basic teaching here, Rudy Dornbush 101, is unilateral intervention doesn't work. Japan has put in a first amount of money, a second amount of money. I guess they have an unlimited piggy bank, but they're really getting nowhere. When do they raise interest rates?
Well, I think that's their problem, that, you can think of intervention as sending a signal that you are going to raise interest rates, building a bridge between a point in time when you're not yet ready, but kind of saying, hey, down the road, it's coming. So far they haven't sent those signals, and my guess would be, they haven't confirmed the intervention, but my guess would be that they've actually put a basket full of money into it. We'll have to see if it succeeds. They tried if it was intervention, it was in a very illiquid part of the day.
I got Euro Yen at 165. It's not succeeding. Yep. Steve Englander, what I find so important here is they have an overt national policy to reflate. Has that been successful? From where I sit, it's ephemeral. It's almost a fiction. Have they successfully escaped the disinflation and deflation of decades?
I'd say somewhere between a 4 and a 6 out of 10.
And imagine what the East German judge gave him. Continue, Steve.
Yeah, I think that the issue is that you're reflating by making yourself poor, right? Because the stuff you buy from abroad is more expensive. That's not what they really wanted in terms of reflation. But you do see some sign that wages are picking up. So to say that it has completely failed is wrong.
Paul Sweeney, the late Martin Feldstein would be screaming right now. This is just bad theory.
Well, that's
all there is to it.
That's kind of where I wanted to go. Steve, I mean, just historically speaking, for those of us who don't follow currency markets that closely, do interventions usually work or ever work over the intermediate to long term?
Oh, I mean, that's such a controversial question. And it's not even clear why they should work, because, most of the time what you do in the foreign exchange market, you undo in your domestic market.
Exactly.
So, there's no change. But like I said, sometimes if the market sees it as a signal that you're ready to change policy, that something fundamental is going to shift, sometimes it makes something that would have happened in 6 months happen now. but there has to be the thing that's going to shift. And so far, they really haven't sent a very strong signal that anything is changing.
Okay, so what should we watch for, Steve Englander? If we announce they're 0 for 3 down, 0 for 2 recently on some form of unannounced intervention, what's the to-do list for the leadership of the nation? From where I sit, they've got to capitulate and get to a normalized rate structure. Am I wrong?
Well, you can't have everything, right? So, you can target your exchange rate, but it means that you have to change your monetary policy. You can shut down, your capital markets, right? Make it harder for money to leave, like, China and some other countries do. But if you're saying we want open capital markets, we want monetary policy to be dictated by domestic fundamentals, your exchange rate going to go where the market wants to take it.
Okay, let's go with Standard Chartered Bank. And folks, Standard Chartered Bank is definitive Pacific Rim and more EM analysis. Bill Winter leading the charge there. Steve Englander, from the Standard Chartered view, how will the Pacific Rim countries, led by a 30% appreciation of Chinese yuan versus yen, how does Sing dollar, how does Taiwan, how does the ringgit, etc., how do they react from this madness in Tokyo?
If we were having this conversation 100 years ago, you'd be asking that question about, sterling. If we were having this conversation 40 years ago, the yen would really matter because they were this export power. And on the margin, they were this sort of competitive edge. Now they're kind of in the pack. They're in the Peleton. So, one thing that's really clear, you would expect that with that kind of depreciation, Japanese exports will go to the moon, but they haven't. So I think the impact on the rest of Asia is much less than you would have expected. Nobody likes it, but the bad part that you would have expected from the yen being so weak and in theory being so competitive, that's just not showing up.
Steve, when you talk to your institutional clients over the last several days, are they buying the yen?
No.
What do they?
I think
what do they need to see to step in, do you think?
Well, as we were saying earlier, I think they need to see some sign that rate differentials are narrowing. If as long as they're 400 basis points between the U.S. and Japan, you'd better be convinced that there's a truckload of yen buying going to come from somebody to jump on it. And I'd say that most of them would say if it went down to 150 or 152, we would be selling yen, not buying it.
Okay, well, let's finish up with this. The impossible trinity is goaltending and defense and offense on the Montreal Canadiens. That's the original definition of impossible trinity. I'm doing this for Englander of Montreal and to the late, great Tobias Lefkovich. Yep. Steve Englander, just simply here, there's an impossible trinity. Krugman wrote the book on this. What do they need to do now to stop this intervention juvenility? What does Japan need to do?
Look, it's a tough one. And, I'd say on the Canadians, I'd take 1 out of 3 out of that trinity at this point. But I think the BOJ just has to, sort of suck it. Look, a lot of countries in the world, they've raised interest rates. We've seen it in the U.S. The damage hasn't been as bad as expected. It's possible that the Japanese economy won't, fall on its face if they raise faster. But they kind of have to decide. We touched 160. Was a big level. They clearly didn't like it. Perhaps they'll say, look, it's the damage from a weak yen is enough that we're going to change monetary policy. But there's no magic bullet there.
Steve Englander, thank you so much. Can't say enough about it. Steve Englander with the Standard Chartered Bank this morning. Paul, my message there is there's lots of theory on this.
Yeah.
And the Japanese somehow think they have a different playbook, a rule book, and they don't.
We'll see here. Again, they haven't confirmed anything in terms of intervention. The market believes there's been at least a couple of interventions just in the last couple of days here, but we got the yen a little bit steady here today, I guess, a little bit, 154.63.
Stephen Englander, the Standard Chartered Bank. Those are the kind of voices we like to do as well. Economic indicators coming up here, lots more ahead. From New York City on Apple CarPlay, Android Play, on YouTube, search Bloomberg Podcasts. Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with his Bloomberg Business Flash. Stocks right now look set to open higher a day after Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell downplayed the prospect of further interest rate hikes. And we're going to get more insight into the health of the U.S. economy, waiting this morning for initial jobless claims as well as factory orders. But the main focus, that's still tomorrow's jobs report. And here they come. Initial jobless claims up were 208,000 for the week ended April 27th. That actually is a little lighter than expectations. We were looking for 211,000, but again, 208. And then the factory orders, still waiting for that. Right now we have futures. They are higher. Dow futures up 168 points. S&P E-mini futures, they're up 32 points, 31 points we'll call it. NASDAQ futures right now up 129 points. The 2-year yield down just 1 basis point. It was down 2 before at 494. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Claims are something there. Thank you so much, John. It's 208, 208, 2 weeks in a row. I look at the 4-week moving average. Don't have it in front of me, but, you know, I'm sorry. There's all this inflation chit-chat, and the answer is the job economy has to break.
Yeah.
And where is it, Paul?
I don't see it. I mean, again, we've consistent. These jobless claims have been coming in right around this 210,000 level for a very long time. So that's solid data.
The Economic Indicators with John Tucker, brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with the solutions they need to grow a thriving business. Commonwealth, go where you grow. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. What's great about this and this next guest is at Chicago, the idea of macrobabble, the Fed, blah, 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 is just look at the microeconomics of the nation. Joining us now out of Chicago, Chief U.S. Economist with Bloomberg, Anna Wong. Thrilled that Dr. Wong could come in here after the hopium that I saw yesterday. There's about supply and demand in price theory, Anna Wong, and the chairman early on alluded to this. Just, Dr. Wong, are we beyond the pandemic? Are we beyond the supply disruptions that he spoke of yesterday?
Yeah, Tom, I'm so glad you mentioned price theory because very few people, increasing dwindling of a number of people are talking about price theory nowadays. But
John Tucker was talking about it this way. What's the bar in New Jersey you go to, the one that overlooks the boats?
Which one? There are about 50 of those.
Continue, Anna.
Okay, so I thought Powell talked a lot about supply yesterday, but in a positive way. I think he is, he was asked several times whether a hike could be on the table, and he rejected all those attempts to get him to say that a hike is on the table. And that's because he's pinning a lot of hope on favorable supply factors. So Tom, he's going further than thinking that the supply bottlenecks from pandemic is going away. He's actually thinking there's actually now positive supply factors in the economy, which is how you can have very low jobless claims, very buoyant labor market while having disinflation. So at least that's his worldview.
So, Anna, again, you're right. He was trying to take that hike off the table. Do you think that was the right decision, or do you think the economic data suggests that maybe we still need something along those lines?
Yeah, I think so. As a Fed watcher, my goal is to predict what he does. So I actually disagree with what he did yesterday, though because from the Fed's perspective, they have a dual mandate, and he perhaps has seen some data that is not suggesting to him that the economy is super strong. He sees downside risk, but that's why he's trying to be more dovish also. But I think he made a mistake, honestly, because I think a lot of Americans are really feeling the pain of inflation. And while the Fed's deadline for bringing inflation to 2% might be the end of 2025, so they have time, I think Americans really want to get it down immediately.
Okay, this is really important statements by Anna Wong, and this is what she's right or wrong. Wong is really, I mean, it's just as simple as this, always thought-provoking as well. Have they just gone to hopium? I mean, that's been my theme this morning, Anna. I've never seen anything like this in my life. Aren't we data dependent in a good way where we just look at the data? I look at claims, granted it's just one little tea leaf and it's asymmetric, but claims is a fully employed America. He can't ignore that.
Well, he is definitely taking a lot of signal from the claims. We actually have a piece on the terminal right now talking about why claims is no longer a leading or reliable indicator of the employment picture. And that's because if you think about it, more than 7 million immigrants has come in the last 3 years.
Right.
And suppose only 3 million of them is employed in the job market right now, and they are laid off. Would they be eligible to apply for claims? No, they won't be.
Paul, did you just see this? Dr. Wong just threw me under the bus.
Yep.
Orlick never would have done that. She threw me under the bus and said, Tom, read my damn claims article because you don't know what you're talking about. But this is key, Paul. And what we're going to be talking about this summer, which Anna Wong's already on, is the immigrant and migrant effect on employment.
Exactly right. So, I mean, Anna, as we think about the jobless numbers we're going to get tomorrow, I guess the consensus is 241,000 jobs added. Is this still a strong labor market? It seems strong to pretty much everybody here. 3.8% unemployment rate.
Yeah, Paul, to your earlier point, does Powell need to hike some more? I do think that some of the increase in the strong job number is real, that we should take signal of the very strong non-farm payroll in the past 3 months. But the key there tomorrow is, once again, the huge discrepancy between the household survey and the non-farm payroll. And the reason why they're different is because non-farm payroll is capturing all these multiple jobs where people who need to work part-time because they wanted to make more money because of the high inflation. So they're capturing all these marginal jobs, not full-time jobs, not the good jobs that you want. There's a whole bunch of extra stuff.
Yeah, let me tell you, Anna, a lot of our listeners and viewers really agree with what you're saying. What would happen if they start cutting rates, even if they don't get a trend, a Greenspanian measured vector? What would happen to our world if they actually said, we're looking at Anna Wong's full-time, part-time mix, we're just going to cut rates a little bit? Would that be bad?
Well, I thought Powell did the right thing in December from his point of view. He's trying to prevent a recession, and it was actually teetering at that point. And now we saw that in the past 4 months, the whole economy really bounced back. And so I think if he does want to cut because he sees weakness, the economy will really bounce back, except that inflation returning to 2% would be pushed back farther.
All right, so let's step back, Anna, here. Love to get the Bloomberg economics call here. Where do we think this economy is going? If you want to quote your GDP call, I just want to get a sense of where this economy is going, because there's a real disagreement, I think, out there.
Yeah, Paul. So we really look deeply at figuring out this puzzle because it's so puzzling. Everything's so puzzling right now. But our model is telling us that because of Powell's December pivot, and he didn't reverse it yesterday. I thought he would, but he is far from reversing it. It means that unemployment could be peaking, this month or next month, and thereafter would be lower, would be going down because the cumulative effect of past rate hikes would have worn off in the second half of this year. And also, inflation would be about 0.5% higher at the end of this year as a result of not reversing that pivot. So that's the path that the economy on if Powell does not put in more hawkish restraint. But that said, if he decided to forego the rate cut in July and wait until December and even talk more hawkishly in the next couple of months, he can take back this stimulus, and then unemployment rate will be rising throughout the year.
Yeah. You're a saint, Dr. Wong, because I'm people know this. I just look at the parlor game like, are you kidding me? And I'm looking at the labor economy and employed Americans. I think her point there, folks, on part-time, full-time economy really has some merit. Anna Wong, right or wrong, she's been just absolutely outstanding for Bloomberg Economics, thinking about the state of the American economy. Futures up 36. Bloomberg Surveillance, well, we're brought to you by Build America Mutual. They insure U.S. municipal bonds that finance essential American infrastructure and provide guaranteed income to improve any portfolio. Be part of building America. Invest in BAM, B-A-M.
BAM.
Build America Mutual Insured Bonds. Invest in BAM Insured Bonds. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and John. There is an ongoing crackdown on campus protests over the war in Gaza. Police began dismantling some of the barricades and tents erected by pro-Palestinian protesters at UCLA after violence erupted the previous night with counter-protesters. And there is late word police apparently used rubber bullets on protesters. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Israeli leaders today, pressing for a ceasefire deal. Blinken is pushing Hamas to accept the current deal, warning that Hamas would bear the blame for any failure.
If Hamas actually purports to care about the Palestinian people and wants to see an immediate alleviation of their suffering, it will take the deal.
Secretary Blinken spoke to reporters in Ashdod, Israel. Former President Donald Trump returns to a New York courtroom today as his hush money trial resumes. Meanwhile, billionaires Howard Lutnick, John Paulson, and Woody Johnson are among the wealthy donors hosting a Manhattan fundraiser for the presumptive Republican nominee later this month. A Bloomberg exclusive, Huawei Technologies, the Chinese telecommunications giant blacklisted by the U.S., has actually been secretly funding cutting-edge research at American universities. Bloomberg's Amy Morris is in Washington.
Huawei is working with Optica, an independent Washington-based foundation. Huawei is the sole funder of a research competition that's awarded millions of dollars since its inception in 2022. A non-public document reviewed by Bloomberg states that Optica shall, quote, not be required to designate Huawei as the funding source or program sponsor of the competition, and that the existence of the agreement is considered confidential information. It is one strategy Huawei is using to remain at the forefront of funding international research, despite U.S. restrictions over concerns that Huawei technology could be used by China as a spy tool. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. Greatly appreciated. Good morning in Houston. Someone in Houston saying it's a little slow down there. I don't know where energy really fits into this. You know, we're hearing people say, look at the energy stocks.
Yeah, I'm looking at WTI crude oil here, just below $80 per barrel, so it's kind of off that peak. But, boy, you think about the average cost of production down there in Houston and $40-50, they're making money.
Good morning in Marrakesh. I really enjoyed it there. I mean, we're going back.
Go back.
There's a hotel which is like Lauren Bacall, Humphrey Bogart, La Moon. It's pretty fancy. And, you know, you could go in there. You could get, you know, it's like a diner.
Okay.
They get the salad niçoise. They get the ceviche de dorade. It's fancy. It's like got a painted ceiling, and there's like 14 different restaurants, and you can hang out by the pool. Belchunas would be out by the pool.
Exactly.
You know.
All right, we'll gas up.
I could see an ETF conference at La Moon in Marrakesh.
Yeah, there's no ETF conferences in Cleveland. They're always in Miami and Marrakesh. Exactly.
Where's he next week? He's in like Europe, right?
Yeah, he's going around Europe. He's preaching the gospel of ETFs to our European clients, and so it'll be standing room only everywhere he goes.
And Greifeld, when she does the ETF racket, she looks like Audrey Hepburn in Charade. She's carrying like 6 Louis Vuitton bags. It's amazing.
I know. They get great guests talk about ETFs. It's been one of the greatest themes just in the last 20 years from my perspective, the amount of money that is going into ETFs.
Look for our ETF coverage, and it doesn't stop. As Paul says, it just grows and grows. You wonder what the next big thing is going to be for ETFs. Our next big thing is a legit rally in the market. Futures up 42. NASDAQ up 1%, up 171 points. And the VIX now under 15, 14.96. That real yield, it came in 2.22, 6 basis points off the Fed meeting yesterday. From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's look at the data. Weekly jobless claims unchanged at 208,000. That was below estimates, though. The bottom line, the labor market still humming along. And then labor costs increasing the first quarter by the most in a year. Productivity gains, they slowed. A big report tomorrow with the April jobs non-farm payrolls report. Stock futures right now higher, getting some steam from the Fed meeting where the tone was no rate hikes this year. Peleton, most active. They were up close to 11%. CEO is out. They're cutting 15% of jobs. The yen was weaker, but looks like that has turned. Now it's up. Stronger, about 0.1%. This underscores rising volatility, making the carry trade less attractive. I keep getting questions like, why do we care, and what's the carry trade? That's when you borrow the yen, swap it for dollars, use the proceeds to buy U.S. assets like treasuries.
Nice. And what are you doing here? Why aren't you on some trading desk, John? Whipping the stuff around.
That's a really good
question.
Because I lose billions of dollars.
Those for shareholder money.
Dow futures up 233, getting a pop. S&P futures, they are right now up 40. The NASDAQ futures up 164. 2-year, now it's down 3 basis points. It was down 2 before, down 3 basis points, 492. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John, thank you so much. Every once in a while, somebody jets in from London, from Europe, of such esteem that we beg for them to come into the studio. And we are thrilled in America today and across this nation to introduce to you Richard Portis, who, to say he's professor of economics at London Business School doesn't even describe his work as an American in England across all sorts of universities, including leading US universities. When you were at Yale and you were a Rhodes Scholar, and this is a few years ago, to say the least, what was the first day like at Oxford?
Unbelievable. The first day was getting off the boat at Southampton and being met by a chap in a bowler hat with an umbrella, right? And that was our introduction to the whole scene. Getting to Oxford, it was just lovely. It didn't, you didn't see the incredibly terrible winter that was coming, where everything froze. We had 6 weeks of couldn't take a shower because the pipes were frozen.
Well, they didn't have internal plumbing back then. I mean, Richie says a certain vintage. One of my great moments with Bloomberg, Professor Portis, was Michael Spence quietly saying to me, I remember sitting in class with John Hicks. Which of the giants in economics gives you that memory, like the laureate Spence had with Professor Hicks?
Well, Sir John was also my teacher, and helped me, guided me on my thesis and so forth.
Does the conventional economics of that time, like the Begg, the one-volume standard British textbook from John Begg, does the conventional economics work at the Fed today or at the Bank of England?
No, I think, in fact, we do need some changes, and there's been a lot of discussion of changes in forecasting, how you do forecasting. The trouble is that people think of economists, macroeconomists in particular, as forecasters. Most of us are not forecasters. And yet the focus is on what did the forecast get wrong, how did they get it wrong, and how do we fix it? And there's some importance to that. And Ben Bernanke just did a review of the Bank of England's forecasting performance. And I think the focus on that is excessive, but people carry the can. And the chief economist of the Bank of England now is on the hawkish side, partly, I think, because he was so scarred by getting...
They're fighting the last war.
By getting the forecast wrong, right?
No, but seriously.
Exactly.
What I see out there, and we don't, Tim Besley would do this with economic history, but the fact is, Professor Portis, we're all fighting the last war, and some people are 2-3 wars behind.
I fear that. I fear that's right. And they don't take account of really important changes. For example, immigration. Immigration has been a big, big factor in the soft landing in the United States, in the relatively good performance of the British labor market, and And people don't, immigration is bad,
right?
But actually, from an economist's point of view, that's not so.
So, Dr. Portis, we'd love to just get your view of the British economy these days. We know here in the U.S. we talk about the exceptionalism of the U.S. economy versus other parts of the world, including China. Talk to us about the British economy. Give us an update.
British economy is not in very good shape, and the British polity is not in very good shape. We are in a transition. We will certainly have a new Labour government. The Conservative government really has gone up, down, and sideways in its economic policies, and it's really hard, actually, for the markets to deal with that. But the economy itself is not performing well. It's just we may have had what you call a technical recession at the end of last year, but however you label it, we are in a very slow growth period, and that, on the other hand, inflation has come down.
If I talk to anyone of your stature, there's always a focus, and with Richard Baldwin, you've really thought about the Eastern European experiment. And I don't want you to weigh in on, like, the war in Ukraine, but did we overreach? Robert Gates and Condoleezza Rice, a lifetime ago, were really worried about the overreach. Mearsheimer of Chicago has said flat out we overreached. Others disagree. Did we overreach in our move eastern in Europe?
I don't want to get into the politics of that, although I have strong views. But economically, on the whole, the addition of 10 countries to the European Union in 2004 has been a positive. It's been good for labor markets. It's been good for reallocating production to lower cost venues and so forth. So that's, I think, on the whole positive. And some of those economies have been growing very well. Poland is an exceptional case, and Poland is very big, of course. So on the whole, the strictly speaking economic experience of enlarging the EU has been positive.
Paul, get one more in.
Doctor, our listeners, our viewers would love to get your sense of kind of the European Union, kind of your view of the European Union, but it feels like it starts and stops with Germany. And we think about the reliance upon Russian energy, China as a buyer of a lot of their GDP.
Germany's very big.
Yep.
It's a very big country. And Mitterrand famously said, the former, now long dead French prime minister, or president rather, said, I like Germany so much, it's really good that there are two of them. That was before the unification. Merger. And so Germany is hugely important, the most important country in Europe, and it hasn't been doing well. Its production model, its business model is being outdated, and they're not quite clear on what to do.
One final question. And you're teaching LBS, but frankly, with everything you've done, including institutions of Berkeley ages ago, et cetera, but is there still too much math in economics? The young Turks today, you had to learn your economic history. You had to know, Hicks from Slutsky, on and on and on. Do the kids today still doing too much math in economics?
I don't think so. If I look at our PhD students, they do, obviously they have to know a lot of maths, but they do a lot of applied stuff. And they apply the maths, apply the statistical techniques and so forth to real data. I think actually we've seen a move away from pure theory, where maths is.
Yeah, we saw that yesterday in the Fed press conference. We moved away from pure theory. Richard Portis, maybe you can do the press conference next time. Richard Portis, the legend at the London Business School, just thrilled that he.
I think he left Yale, went over to the UK, and just said, "That's it. I'm not coming back.
Oh yeah,
I'm good.
It's
good here."
They do that. Trubowitz did that. He was at LBJ and he's over at LSE. No, I'm not coming back.
Yeah, I'm not coming back.
Richard Portis, thank you so much, Professor, for being with us today. We're going to get back on track. I mean, after you have an academic like Richard Portis, you got to get grounded in the American way. How best can we do that? Let's think. How about Tom Petty? I think that would. Here's Professor Petty here. We'll do this for you. The futures up 36. Dow futures up 203. The VIX 15.05. Yen, for those keeping score, 154.60. Good morning.
I was flying
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney on YouTube. Bloomberg Podcast. Search for it out on YouTube. A new global distribution. We are humbled by the response worldwide and across this nation. Good morning in Montana, among other places as well. We're going to get to this quickly because Michael Feroli's with us. We want to get to him as soon as we can. Apple out this afternoon. I'm sorry, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal for Apple and its shareholders, but also for the tech space in general. Got to get a handle on what's happening in China, both from an end user perspective and as well as supply chain. A lot of stuff comes out of China.
We'll have to see on that. Of course, this morning, Bloomberg Surveillance brought to you by BNY Mellon Insight. June 4th to the 6th in Nashville, Tennessee. Don't miss the essential event for the financial advice community. Visit Insight. Let me spell this. INSITE, insight.bnymellon.com. Insight.bnymellon.com in Nashville, June 4th to the 6th as well. An important event. You're going to be there, right?
Sure, absolutely.
You're gonna go down and hang out.
Alex and I have been down there.
Bluebird Cafe.
You betcha. I mean,
Pantry,
Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
Gaylord Entertainment took them public back in the day.
You, right?
Sure, absolutely. Anybody's welcome.
Look what you come, John.
Yeah, we'll get the.
I
know a guy.
We'll do it. Let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash quickly here. John Tucker.
All right, mega cap stocks climbing ahead of Apple's results. Apple in the pre-market up about 1.5%. Among the data, labor costs increasing by the most in a year. Productivity gains slowed. This comes before Friday's jobs report, and Jerome Powell said it's unlikely the Fed's next move is going to be to raise interest rates. So futures getting a pop from that. Dow futures up 193. S&P E-mini futures up 32. The NASDAQ futures right now, they are up 132 points. And Carvana shares, they are soaring right now. The online used car retailer reporting a surprise profit. And we check the markets for you all day long. Right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thank you so much. When we invented this is what it's about. Richard Portis, legendary at the London Business School. Michael Feroli studied him at Chicago. And now joining us, Professor Feroli of JPMorgan. Again, it could be a 1-hour conversation. Michael Feroli, what I witnessed yesterday was the biggest amount of hopium I've ever seen. I mean, I'm sorry, Michael. I'm looking at, and they're all doing the parlor game, how many rate cuts and all that. What is the underlying, if you're in class with Richard Portis at LBS, Michael Feroli, what's the underlying theory of this Fed?
I think the underlying theory is that rates are restrictive, and that over time that will have a moderating effect on inflation. Now, I think, there's a couple things there, but I think another thing I heard that maybe I didn't see so much commented on is that, I didn't feel like he thinks that inflation at 2.7 or 2.8 is like an emergency situation, right? Which is interesting because if you go back, 15 years before we 15 to 20 years when we first started debating a formal inflation target, there were a lot of people saying, a comfort zone of 1% to 3%. And obviously we settled on 2%. We're not there, but he didn't really seem to think that 2.7, 2.8 is
right.
Something that is worthy of really risking growth.
This is why this is the conversation of the day. Michael Feroli, ages ago, set the potential GDP of the nation under 2%, and there's this raging debate about should we panic with inflation at this level right now. Clarida, the former vice chairman, Richard Clarida, Michael Feroli, has suggested we're going to bring up the 2% level. What do you and Bruce Kasman and your team say? What is an appropriate blended, banded target rate for the new Fed, the next Fed?
So if we're talking about real GDP growth, and we're talking about potential real GDP growth, normally we think of that as something that's going to, obtain over on average the next 5 years or something like that, right? I think in this particular situation, it's hard to get around the issue of immigration and how that's affecting trend growth. So just to, level set here, over the past 12 months, we've averaged payrolls around 250,000 per month, job growth 250,000 per month. And in that period, the unemployment rate has trended up on sort of averaging out about 0.3 percentage point, which would tell you, all else equal, that steady state job growth could be above 200,000, right? And if that's the case, then I do think potential GDP, if you want to put it that way, over the past year has probably been above 2%. Yeah. Certainly we've had growth well above 2% over the past year. Again, alongside no evidence of tightening in labor markets, no evidence of that tightening in inflation data or wage data. So I do think currently, the full employment growth of the economy is above 2%. Now, I started off by saying normally we think about, potential GDP growth as something that's contained over long stretches of time. And I think in this situation, it's a little more tricky to say because, the prospects for immigration into next year, I think, are going to depend on, policy choices that are made regarding immigration policy, which could, dramatically affect whether that 250K number I mentioned earlier is going to be something that, rolls on into 25 and beyond, right?
Michael, how concerned are you about inflation? Because I think there is a debate out there in the marketplace whether what we've seen over the last 3 months is something we need to worry about or not. How do you think about it?
I still think we're on a disinflationary path. For one reason, I guess if we can either come at it from a bottom up or top down. I think in the bottom up, Chair Powell a few times yesterday laid out the case for why rental inflation is going to come off. And if rental inflation normalizes, then I think that gets you, a good chunk of the way back to a more, acceptable inflation rate. And I think you could see that in things like, in Europe, they use this HICP, which is basically CPI minus OER. The BLS here in the U.S. produces one of those, and right now that HICP is a little over 2%. Core HICP is a little below 2%. So, basically from the bottom up, if that, if those rental measures come down, that gets you a long way there. And from the top down, I don't really see in a big way inflation pressures picking up in the first quarter. Now, I know earlier this week you got that disappointing ECI, but at the same time, some other wage measures have been a little less worrisome. And I guess most importantly, inflation expectations still look pretty well.
Feroli is talking like he's a president of the New York Fed. He's on the edge of Goolsby.
Exactly.
He's like on the edge of Austin
JPMorgan. Hey, Michael, there are folks out there in the marketplace, both academics and practitioners, that say, you know what, this Fed's just way behind the 8 ball here. They should be cutting rates now. Inflation is, in fact, under control if you look at some more real-time data. Do you share that view?
Not necessarily. I guess I do buy in. Look, there's a risk they are behind the ball, right? Yep. I think if that risk pans out, if tomorrow morning we get a real, dud of a payroll report, then we'll find out they were behind the ball. But I think if we're behind the ball, if they are, they can catch up pretty quickly, right? They can, they can cut quickly. They can cut in larger increments than 25 basis points. So I think it's a risk, but it's a manageable risk.
Right. Michael, I want to bring it over to the labor economy. We've got the jobs report tomorrow. And Anna Wong was heated about this, and that we have a fully employed America. I get it. But what we're hearing from our listeners and viewers is that's just flat out wrong. Are we a fully employed America into the jobs report tomorrow?
I think we are, but I do think there's signs that the vigor we're seeing in labor market activity is moderating. And, I guess to your point about, Americans saying, well, that's flat out wrong. Yesterday we had a consumer conference, the Conference Board's consumer confidence number, which, and again, Chair Powell mentioned this yesterday. Within that, they asked people, are jobs plentiful? Are they hard to get?
Yeah.
That's been pointing to some loosening up in the labor market. Still, overall, if you look at that, consumers are saying jobs are still pretty plentiful. So I think we're fully employed. We're probably moving in a direction where, again, the vigor of hiring is certainly slowing. Gross hiring is slowing. The appetite for new postings of vacancies is waning. So, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a bit nuanced.
We're
fully employed, but not ready.
Got to leave it there. Michael Feroli, thank you so much with JPMorgan. Getting ready for his weekly prospects. Can't say enough about 7 p.m. Friday nights. Feroli with the first piece out for the weekend. Futures up 32 with our news in New York City. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, John. Former President Donald Trump's hush money trial in New York resumes this morning, with a judge considering whether to hold Trump in contempt before the jury hears any new witness testimony. Trump's defense is going to cross-examine Keith Davidson. He is the attorney who brokered the $130,000 hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. The defense has said that payment was meant to protect Trump's family, but Davidson has testified that Trump wanted to silence Daniels because the Access Hollywood tape had come out and Trump's campaign couldn't take another sex scandal. Loyola law professor and former federal prosecutor Lori Levinson.
The Trump trial will start with basically another hearing by the judge on whether Trump has violated the gag order again. Now, that's really remarkable, given that the judge has already imposed sanctions for 9 other violations. But the same day, Trump went out on the air and accused the judge of rigging the 2024 election. And we don't know whether there were other violations as well.
Former federal prosecutor Lori Levinson. Police in Los Angeles appeared to have used rubber bullets on demonstrators as they dismantled an encampment on UCLA. Several protesters have been arrested. President Joe Biden will expand 2 national monuments in California today, protecting nearly 120,000 additional acres from development. It's part of a White House goal to designate more land and water for conservation than any previous administration. The bulk of the newly protected land will enlarge the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument outside of Los Angeles. Finally, Lefty is thinking about hanging up his golf bag. Phil Mickelson spoke to Bloomberg TV.
I'm 53 now, and my career, if I'm being truthful, it's towards its end, and now I would like to help others find the same enjoyment, fulfillment that the game of golf has provided me.
Phil Mickelson on Bloomberg. Global news, 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, and John.
Ample coming up. Paul, tell you about that. Peloton, Ron Josie just publishes at Citigroup. I love this. Buy. High risk.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I mean, this is a classic pandemic stock. When the lockdown happened, people were just rushing to buy these things, and the company was rushing to build them and get them out there, and they overexpanded, and so the backside and the pain is pretty tough.
Let me quote: concurrently, the company announced a CEO transition and the fact that no one on the Bloomberg surveillance team uses the product. Thank you for that, Ron Josie. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. As we wait for Friday's jobs report, futures pushing higher. Fed Chair Powell throwing cold water on the idea of a hike this year. And, of course, the parade of earnings continues. DoorDash, those shares are lower after the food delivery company delivered a forecast for adjusted earnings that trailed the average estimate. eBay shares, they're down to the pre-market after the e-commerce company's forecast for second quarter net revenue. That missed consensus expectations. And Carvana shares jumping after the online used car retailer reporting a surprise profit at Peleton shares. Most active in the pre-market. CEO stepping down, cutting 15% of the jobs as we look at it right now. Those shares are up 9.3%. Overall, the Dow futures up 174 points. S&P E-mini futures 30 points higher. The Nasdaq futures up 128 points. 2-year yield down 1 basis point. That's at 494. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John, thanks so much. Paul, real quickly here, out on live chat, they're like, where's Damien Sassower? It's like you and I don't even exist.
Well, I'm looking at the weather outside. I think I know where he is.
Yeah, you think it's like 80 degrees today
80
in
degrees today in New York. Course. Yeah,
try to get 9 in it at least. Good morning, Damien. Hope you're having a good time up in Connecticut as well. This is an important conversation. You know, we walked in today and there's all the Fed stuff and all that. Who isn't affected by Apple? I mean, that's just the starting point.
I mean, how many gajillions of Apple products are out there?
Anurag Rana joins us right now. And Anurag, I don't want to go to, maybe Paul wants to go to product or China. This is the most profitable company on the planet. Even if they do low single-digit revenue growth, am I correct? They still mint money?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is a classic value company with a lot of free cash flow. They manage their expenses, very well. CapEx is low. I mean, just a phenomenal value.
Does the street understand this? Does the street understand they don't need Microsoft growth?
Yeah, but at the same time, you have to have some growth. I think that's the big question here is, do they actually see positive growth rate, and when do they see some of it? And, frankly speaking, that's a big overhang on the stock.
All right, so the earnings conference call will be this afternoon, widely listened to, I'm sure, by many, many members of the marketplace here. China, what do they have to say? What can they say to maybe lift the cloud a little bit in terms of end user demand for their phones, number one, and number two, supply chain, any challenges there?
Yeah. So the two words I'd be focused on, if they utter the word China is stabilizing, it's good. Now, I don't think they can say China has rebounded because we don't see that. All the leading indicators tell us things are still tough there. But perhaps start with the word stabilization. Now, if they continue to say China remains a problem for them, or they're struggling there, then I think it's going to be another quarter of similar stories that are going to come out to say that they're losing share to Huawei, and there is no growth there.
So China is, again, going to be a challenge, and we'll see what management says here. Overall, AI, is that something that investors want Apple to lean into now, or is there patience to say, oh, Apple will figure it out at some point?
No, they have to mention a few things that they are working on. They will not make any big announcements because they're saving that for the June conference. But they really need to give some element of this thing. So think about it, Paul, and what is the real big catalyst for anybody to go move out and change their phone? They don't need it. The phones work very well. We see that. Partially, the number one reason is battery. If your battery is low, then you're going to go out and move it. Now, if you see a lot of AI applications out there in the space and your phone is not working well, it hangs, or the answers take a while, then there may be a reason for people to go out and improve it. And that's what we are hoping for, that sometime this year they go out and give that killer application and say, buy the new phone, it can do a lot of cool stuff for you.
I got a return on invested capital of 55%, which, folks, was in none of the textbooks I ever studied. Amazon goes no dividend. To me, Anurag, it's nonsensical that they have to come out today with a dividend lift and a massive share buyback a la Google. What is it, the culture? Did Steve Jobs put a codicil in his will that they can't do that? Why is Apple so reticent to give the world their cash flow back.
No, but they spend the entire cash flow to buy back shares. The question is, do they accelerate or not? They are buying back $90 to $100 billion worth of shares every year. So it's not as if they're not using it. But there is another big overhang that people don't talk about. Not overhang, but it's an unknown thing. Google pays Apple $20 billion or so, somewhere in that range. They don't disclose it, but that's the number people say it is, to make it a default search engine. What if the judge over the next 12 months, somewhere in that time frame, says, that's illegal and Google cannot do that? Google doesn't get hurt with that stuff because, Google is the best search engine and people will download Google app and use it. Apple gets really hurt. And that $20 billion is pure operating income. So there is there are certain, but that's the whim of the judge. We don't know what's going to happen there, Paul.
All right. So what's the smart thinking when you talk to the legal beagles out there? What are they saying about the risk to Apple there?
See, that's what I said. That's a big unknown. It could go either way. And once that overhang is over, then I feel a little bit more confident pounding the table on this thing, because that $20 billion will take a lot of years to make up.
All right, so let's step back from the Apple story. What else in technology? When you talk to your clients out there, what else in technology are people just kind of no-brainer, I'm buying this thing?
They're wondering what Ed Ludlow is going to do with his Tesla.
Tesla car, exactly.
I mean, Ed's out there. Ed's driving down the road.
Well, he's not even driving. He's doing the
automatic
automatic
stuff. He's doing
stuff.
the automatic thing.
I don't know what's going on.
I mean, come on, Anurag. They had X number, seriously, they had X number of accidents with Tesla. Is Tesla a safe car?
I drove it many years ago and I love it, but I'm not a big EV buff, so I'll leave it up to those who like that car.
But
for the tech world, but for the tech world, one thing I could say is we are seeing massive amount of capex. It is just people are spending like there is no tomorrow.
Are they spending smart?
We'll find out, because if the AI workloads don't come through over the next few years, then it's not smart. But all the leading indicators tell us that people are spending, experimenting with AI. Amazon's going to spend, in our view, somewhere over $65 billion this year in CapEx, creating new data centers, new chips, hardware, so that they can fulfill the demand that they're seeing from their clients.
Do we have the grid? Do we have the electricity to electrify all this CapEx?
It'll be fun to see, since the regulators don't allow tech companies to buy other tech companies, will they allow tech companies to buy some maybe power plants or something? Because that is going to be one of the bigger bottlenecks over the next few years to see how they can source those data centers.
Anurag, thank you so much. Anurag Rana with a brief there this afternoon. Tim and Carol and Tim, they will have the Apple earnings for you. Rich emails in and says, "Who's Ed Ludlow?"
I know.
I mean, I'm shocked.
I thought that was a given.
Ed Ludlow leading all of our technology program, also our aerospace reporter as well.
Which is
surveillance,
So we send him to the desert, I think, like down on the Texas-Mexico border,
just
wherever
goes to the
Elon
music.
has his stuff.
He goes to the music.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, Ed Ludlow, our technology editor out there in San Francisco, he just bought a Tesla.
It's out on Twitter.
Follow him on Twitter, because he's got some interesting real-time experience in driving this assisted driving.
Yeah, I made a turn and the car didn't.
Yeah,
I mean,
and he'll say,
sorry, that's the...
One of his recent tweets was his recent 30-minute commute to work went fine with the assisted driving. He didn't have to do much until they got to the Golden Gate Bridge, and then they had a problem figuring out which lane to get into. So,
I don't
want to have a problem on the Golden Gate Bridge.
What is a Tesla auto drive going to do with the congestion tax in New York City?
Hopefully you'll not get charged. Yeah. No, I think it's got a feature where it rolls up the license plate as you go through the
it does a
detector.
James Bond thing.
Yeah.
So the license plate is what's going to identify you. Is that right?
If you don't have Easy Pass toll thingy.
Okay.
So it's an Easy Pass.
Yeah, it reads the Easy Pass transponder. If you don't have that, presumably it's going to read the license plate, toll you at a higher rate, and then send the bill through the mail. If you don't pay that, your registration is suspended, and then you know.
Seriously, and it's an unfair question. If you don't know the answer, that's fine. Do we all get billed monthly, daily?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Oh.
I think there's a lot we don't know about it. John Tucker, our surveillance congestion correspondent, a big issue in the 5 boroughs of New York City. Futures advance. NASDAQ up 0.8%, up 143 points. A VIX 15.08. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg newsroom. Ahead of the opening bell from the New York Stock Exchange, futures have been pointing to a higher open all morning long. And there you have it, the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Traders taking some comfort from the Fed's signal that there's no plan to raise interest rates right out of the gate. S&P 500 38 points higher. That's up about 0.8%. We're at 5,057 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 231 points. That is a rise of 0.6% right now. And the NASDAQ 100 is up 0.9%, 158 points higher. Apple, most actively traded in the early going. Those shares up 1.7%. After we get their results after the close of regular trading today. And also Peleton, with the CEO stepping down, those shares 14% higher. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. That's your opening bell report. I'm John Tucker. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much, John. Right to it here on the equity markets. And let's do a reset now on the levels 38,134. SPX 5,055, NASDAQ 100 17,476. Linda Dissel is with Federated. Thrilled she could be with us today with Federated Hermes. Linda, I just want to cut to the chase here. What's short term for you?
You mean in terms of time?
Yeah.
Oh, short term would be with the next several months.
I look at short term in the market and the hysteria of going down 3 or 4% drawdown. I'm absolutely fascinated how we've lost our bearings on time frame. Have you seen that out there? That the new short term is something different than what you and I were weaned on?
Yes. Oh, and I forgot to say thank you for having me on. Definitely over these decades, you've seen more and more the focus on short term. And I think you bring up the point that now it's even shorter term. And like you said, people panic from what is a general 3 times a year correction. I think that has a lot to do with the access that we have these days to all kinds of information, and how closely we're tied to it.
So yesterday, Linda, we heard from Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell. I guess he seemed to take the rate hike off the table. Was that enough for you, or do you think that this Federal Reserve should be maybe doing more?
I think that, we never really at Federated Hermes thought that they would raise interest rates next. It definitely seems like the next should be a cut as our economy is slowing. So in terms of doing more, we're definitely restrictive now. And I think that's what was interesting as to what he said yesterday, which is we are restrictive and disinflation seems to have stopped. And so therefore we need to stay higher for longer and longer. And we have said for a year and a half now, they're going to say higher for longer. Then we said higher for longer, longer. And now I'm going to say higher for longer, longer, and even longer. And you know what? We could be okay. That could be okay.
I like the idea we'll be okay, and that's something that I think is not in the language right now. How will corporations adapt? Is just the short answer to right size and cut costs?
Well, it's very interesting as well as we're going through this earnings season and what you just announced about Peleton. I was reading the comment that the president made. We're laying off 15% of our workforce because there is simply no other way to bring spending in line with revenues. This is where we are in the cycle, and this is where it gets a lot more interesting to be a stock picker because some companies can maintain their profit margins and others are going to suffer their profit margins. And then there's nothing else to do but cut people because, well, look how the stocks react. The stocks love it when you're cutting costs.
Yep.
And I think that's where we are in the cycle, and that's going to play out. And that's why I'm not particularly worried about them raising rates. It's more like a question of the next catalyst being an noticeable unemployment acceleration.
Okay.
Which we don't have yet.
All right, Linda, if you're not too concerned about the rate environment, that brings us to earnings. And we're more than halfway through this S&P earnings season here. What are you seeing? Anything out there that's concerning you?
What I think is particularly concerning, it is a mixed earnings season. And while earnings are better than the low bar that was put 4th at the beginning of this earnings season. It's being beaten. That's all good. It's good. And whatever pullback we're having in general for the market seems to be price to earnings related. And that's kind of good for a correction as well. But when a company disappoints in whatever way that the market doesn't like what they hear, they get hit for 10, 15%, or they go up 10 or 15%. And that's not normal. That's not, I don't feel like that's healthy at all. So I think there's a lot of short triggers out there, and I think that goes to what Tom was saying about short-term nature in our views.
Linda Dissel has an acclaimed note, folks, and everybody reads it because it's totally twisted. Up top, she's making the golf course tour.
I love this.
She's going to York, Pennsylvania, air conditioning world of, whatever, York, and we all know that. Then she goes spicy to Baltimore. She checked out the Orioles.
Yep.
Linda Dissel's, looking down on McCormick and their headquarters at the Hayfields Country Club. And then she's up at my old haunt. She's out at Oak Hill Country Club. That's where I first heard the Rolling Stones. Oak Hill Country Club, where they had the Open. And she's out there in real America looking at where the fancy people play the golf courses. Linda, my big take with Bloomberg is we're all looking at 3 zip codes in New York City. You're living in Pittsburgh. You're out there at these golf courses. Is there a manufacturing renaissance going on in York, in Baltimore with McCormick, in Rochester? Is there a new manufacturing renaissance going out there that New York's blind to?
I don't know about a manufacturing renaissance. The strength that I see is still in services. And I'm not hearing that. I'm not hearing about the manufacturing renaissance. And traveling, yes, I'm traveling. I'm getting some on the road, but just even the regional numbers are not good for manufacturing. We're kind of in a steady state situation. What I find very interesting is what I'm hearing in my travels these days is what I think of as the recession. People losing their jobs that are making $125,000 and plus. Labor hoarding, unraveling. That's what I find interesting in my travels.
Interesting. What about dividends unraveling? Amazon without a dividend. I mean, this is Steve Oth 101. Give us back the money. I mean, Apple's a proxy this afternoon, but Linda Dissel, are we going to see a new round of share buyback, use of cash, including dividend increase?
Well, I think definitely we're going to continue to see buybacks, and we have done so. That's been one of the strengths that we've seen here. What's been very interesting lately, and whenever we have these, if you call it a tremor, a 3 to 5% pullback, and you see groups like utilities catching a bid, this I think is maybe a shout out to these are undervalued, underloved dividends. Who cares about dividends? Well, maybe now we start to care about dividends more, and particularly if we think interest rates will come down next and not go up anymore.
So, Linda, as we think about sectors to look at here, as we parse through the earnings here, are we still overweight technology and then maybe try to find some value other places? I mean, is technology still the engine that has to pull this train here?
Technology seriously has it going on, and so I wouldn't downplay that at all, except we obviously see that the Magnificent Seven has frayed a bit here, and again, some big moves in the names in terms of up or down. So it would be natural if you said, as we have at Federated Hermes for some time, you will see a broadening. We've been saying it before others, I think, and we see broadening first throughout technology, and that's good, and then we see it throughout the rest of large cap cyclical. That's value with the cyclical side, and we're seeing that too. So we've had an overweight in energy and financials. Energy, well, not sure yet how it's catching a bid, but financials sure have, and healthcare as well.
At Federated, what are you actually seeing with what people are doing with money market funds? I'm going to go old school. I got 3 months LIBOR, 5.60%. Wow. What are people doing with money market funds, Linda Dissel?
Well, people just are thrilled with what you're getting from money market funds. And of course, we are benefiting from that. And what I hear as I travel is a lot of advisors and their clients are kind of, even as we're saying, you should go out the risk spectrum in terms of the yield curve in terms of the bond market, and because you can get NAV when you can get price appreciation when yields come down, and they're like, I don't know, I really like my cash. They're kind of having a hard time moving off the cash. So when Fed chairman says longer for longer, they say, you know what, I am good, and it's a great way to sleep at night, particularly if you're an aging baby boomer.
Linda, thanks for the overview. Thanks for the tours of the freshwater golf courses from York to Baltimore up to Rochester, New York as well. Linda Dissel with Federated Hermes this morning, up 138 points. I don't know, it's sort of round trip. Up we went with Powell, down we went, we come back. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, but here we are.
I don't know what to make
a little bit higher here.
VIX 15.24. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, John, police in tactical gear moved in on protesters on the UCLA campus this morning. Some demonstrators left, others did not. This student demonstrator supports the Palestinians.
Police uphold the system of oppression. And, obviously it's not right. They're just upholding the status quo. So we need to resist and we need to keep protesting. And that's the only way change will be made.
Former LAPD police officer and former Los Angeles City Council member Dennis Zine said the encampment will be cleared and those who did not voluntarily leave will face the consequences.
What we see happening is the methodical process of clearing the encampment, arresting the individuals, and you'll start seeing those arrests and the plastic cuffs placed on the individuals, and they'll all be going to jail.
Former Officer Zine spoke to CBS. Testimony is scheduled to resume today in former President Trump's criminal hush money trial in New York. But first, Judge Juan Merchan has again scheduled a hearing to consider whether to hold Trump in criminal contempt for violating his gag order, this time on 4 additional occasions. The judge already ruled Trump violated the gag order 9 times and fined him $9,000. Trump focused part of yesterday's campaign rally in Freeland, Michigan, on the judgments against him in several cases, including the gag order.
Unconstitutionally gagged. He gagged me. So I'm not even supposed to be, I would say, talking to you because he gagged me.
Prosecutors are seeking $1,000 fines for each of 4 comments by Trump that they say violated a judge's gag order. President Joe Biden including ally Japan, along with rivals China and Russia, in a list of countries he called xenophobic in a speech at a campaign fundraising event in Washington. Biden reiterated remarks he made last month, linking China's economic woes to its unwillingness to accept immigration. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Here's the single most important sentence in a lengthy Wikipedia. By 1991, Serena Williams had a 46-3 record in the USTA Junior Tour and was ranked number 1 among under 10-year-old players. Her father stopped sending his daughters on the tournament so they could go slowly. That's his language. Okay. This is the most important athlete ever where they didn't get on the jockocracy.
Yep.
He fought it. Their father fought the whole way to try to be normal.
Yep.
I mean, more than any other athlete I know.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary story. I mean, I kind of feel like she's the best player in tennis, period, of all time.
Completely changed. I mean,
of
you
any
know,
male,
the metal the tennis racket came out. That was a big deal, but
Yep.
she changed the game.
Yeah, I think so.
You're right. And I was thinking about this. I had a conversation with somebody, Serena Williams or Billie Jean King, and I started thinking about it. It's like, you got to say Serena Williams.
I would say Serena.
Extraordinary.
A little bit. We're going to talk about that coming up here. We've got Jason Kelly coming to darken the door, but I just, in the whole jockocracy
No,
of
he's
America.
not darkening the door. You know where he is?
Oh.
Miami. You know what's in Miami?
You know.
The F1. He's with those people.
Oh, man.
Those types of people. He's in Miami for F1.
How come we didn't get,
I didn't even get a whiff of an invite for that.
Did we?
I think it's Rich's fault.
What are
I'm
we?
blaming.
We're like crumbs on the floor.
Look at us. I can't even get on I-80 here, man. And then my man's in my, dude.
When Jason comes back to New York, does he have to do congestion pricing?
I don't think so.
Or is he so special he doesn't have to,
No, he just bypasses
he gets
that.
a waiver on that.
He gets a waiver.
We're going to do that. We're going to talk to Jason Kelly about this coming up from Miami. But I just think this is just one of the hugest stories for every parent out there.
Yep.
Incredibly gifted, and the father just said, we're not doing the jockocracy.
Yeah.
I just think it's an amazing story. Right now, we got the Dow up 110 points, VIX 15.28. The real yield gets coming back up a little bit, 2.27%. Bloomberg surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Information technology. Right now, that's the best performing major industry groups in the S&P 500. So that's where you're going to find semiconductors like shares of NVIDIA. The technology shares pushing stocks higher ahead of Apple's earnings. That comes after the close of regular trading. Apple most actively traded right now. Its shares up just about 1.7%. Wall Street analysts expect the iPhone maker to announce a stock buyback. iPhone sales in China also going to be a big focus. S&P 500 right now 22 points higher. That's up 0.4%. We're at 5,040 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 107 points. That's a rise of 0.3%. And the Nasdaq 100 up 121 points. That is a rise of 0.7%. Data this morning in the run-up to the monthly employment report. The data showed labor costs jumping the most in a year as productivity gains, they slowed. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much. Highlight of the week in New York was Lewis Hamilton going down Fifth Avenue and doing a wheelie in his F1 car. It was great. I thought it was Farrell for a minute. It was just Farrell going home from an arduous day at the office. F1 has been over in Asia, in China. I thought it was sort of boring. Japan was phenomenal. And now they're back one of the three stops here in Miami. Miami, I think it's Austin, and Las Vegas is a big, big event here as well. And joining us now, of course, he's host of The Deal with one Alex Rodriguez. It's Bloomberg Originals, and they're going to talk to Serena Williams. But joining us right now, Surveillance Formula One Group A
coverage,
Jason Kelly. Yeah, you got to be kidding me. I mean, what are you doing? Crashing in Mike McGlone's? Trying to get into Miami F1. What are you going to do down there, Jason?
Taking in the scene here, Tom, it's fascinating. This is year 3 of the Miami Grand Prix, and the stars come out for this one. And I have to say, a lot of quote unquote sort of our people, the Bloomberg world, really shows up for this one. The whole Wall Street South thing very much in effect. So I'm going to be hobnobbing. That's what I do.
I know the invite got lost in the mail. There's a whole bunch of new tension. We don't need to go into Formula One knowledge on this, but Miami this year is different than any Miami. There's some legitimate sport tension, isn't there?
Legitimate sport tension in terms of the race, or in terms of
Formula
One
the guy at Red Bull's going over to Ferrari, but he hasn't announced it yet, and McLaren's doing better.
Yeah, all the drama is really off the track this season, that's for sure. So I'm most interested in hanging out in the paddock later today and tomorrow and sort of picking up the gossip. So I'll let you know.
Serena Williams, special. What was the key distinction of your conversation with Alex Rodriguez with a tennis giant?
I think the main thing that really jumped out at me, Tom, and you were talking about her relationship with her father, was how much he did for her. You said it beautifully, sort of set her up so beautifully, her and her sister Venus, for tennis. What he then did was put her business and Venus's business in their own hands. He said very clearly to them, you figure out, I'm here for you, but you figure out what to do with your money. And she did, and she has done it in a massive, massive way. She's hugely influential in the business world, not just as an athlete, but now trying to sort of make that leap to being an investor and having some success so far.
So how is she doing this? How is she affecting this? Because it's fascinating to see how some of these former athletes in their next life, how they think about, participating in the business world, investing, operating. What is she doing?
Yeah. So I think the key distinction, Paul, and this actually does go back to her father. Her very first deal, she talks in depth about this in the episode, was with Puma. That was her big endorsement. And the thing he insisted on that she has never let go is that she be at the table. She was a teenager. It was late into the night. She literally fell asleep at the negotiating table, which was fine. He wanted her physically there. And, not to be overly glib about it, she's never left. She really takes into account her presence on every major deal. She has a great team around her, but she's intensely involved. And now what she's doing, guys, is she's very much focused on how to bring other underrepresented people, whether it's women, whether it's people of color, into especially the world of venture capital investments, because the numbers, as you know, are just minuscule in terms of the amount of money that goes to essentially like non-white dudes.
Exactly. So where does she have a focus for her VC type investing? Is there any industry she feels comfortable with or feels like she can add value?
She's pretty wide ranging. I mean, she's gone to, a lot of it is where she does think she can add value. One thing that she was early in, interestingly enough, was Masterclass. She was an angel investor there, saw the potential for that early on. She understands media. She especially understands fashion. Notably when she retired, she did not go on ESPN. She didn't go on Bloomberg. She did it through an essay in Vogue. She's been deeply involved in that. She was deeply involved in that as a player, too. You talk about the ways that she revolutionized the game. Think about all the things she wore on the court that changed the way we think about the sport.
Yeah. I spent a magical evening at the White House Correspondents' Dinner with Venus, and I think Serena was in the room somewhere. I can't remember. Are they close, Jason?
Yes. Very, very close. I mean, probably couldn't be closer. They geographically live, I think, a couple blocks from each other here in South Florida, intensely close, and I think really have relied on each other for their entire lives, and no one's a bigger fan of the other than their sister.
So you coming back from Miami today, or
No. I need to soak it in, Tom. I'm doing some reporting here. I mean,
You're reporting.
Yes, it's an important one.
Exactly.
Very good. Jason Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The deal with Alex Rodriguez, it's been very successful in moving from not every success, but people, the ups and downs of the deal, the ups and downs of after that athletic life. Serena Williams, front and center for them. Most interesting to say the least. Paul, I want to go back to Securities Analysis 101, which is, for example, CFA Level 1, you use John Deere or Caterpillar as your accounting model. There's never been a model like Apple. To me, it is unique.
Yeah, it really is, and it's been rewarded in the marketplace as such. But you think about it, almost $400 billion of revenue is projected for this year. It's not growing a lot, as we heard from Anurag, but boy, you look at the EBITDA margins, 34% on like $400 billion of revenue. It's just extraordinary. And they dropped $100 billion of free cash flow this year, and that's going to grow maybe 14 or 15% next year. So the profitability is just extraordinary, and the absolute dollar amounts are extraordinary. And so, as Anurag Rana said, what do you do with all that free cash flow? What they've been generally doing is buying back stock.
He did say that you have to have growth. I mean, there's a whole theory out there that with low single-digit growth, they can keep this going. And Anurag said, no, they've got to. They've got a product announcement. Jason Kelly's probably going to it.
Probably, of course.
But they have like a thing coming up May 7, I'm guessing.
There's one. The big one is in June, in early June. That's going to be where they get all their developers together. And if they're going to announce something AI,
right,
that's where it's going to be. I'm just looking at the FA function, Tom, mid-single-digit revenue growth for the next 3-4 years for them.
Right, and now we go to John Tucker, our surveillance. I have the oldest cell phone in the building correspondent. Are you on the iPhone 4 or iPhone 5 right now?
I'm on the BlackBerry 3.
BlackBerry 3. You're the last person using a BlackBerry.
Perfecting the art of texting with my two thumbs.
Do you have a Palm Pilot at your desk? Remember the Palm Pilot?
Yeah.
I actually do have a Palm Pilot. That was very cool. And
there's your technology report from John Tucker.
Apple what?
This way. It's like when Michael Douglas fell down the hill in that movie with Kathleen Turner.
Right.
And had the big ugly cell phone. That's what he's in the Hummer H2 going through the tunnel.
My cell phone doubles as a weapon.
Exactly.
That's good. This has been an amazing day. I can't say enough about our booking team. Richard Porter and Michael Feroli back to back.
Yep.
I'm sorry, that's what this is about. This song, it's amazing to me, the history of this song with the gifted Bryan Adams of Canada. He gave this to Blue Oyster Cult. They said no. Then he went to 38 Special. They said no. He said, damn, I'll have to record it myself. And it was this ginormous hit. Good morning.